ставши на коліно, своє полкове знамено, дивлюсь на нього я востаннє, у нез'ясованій журбі, всю кров мою, всі скитання, воно вібрало у собі. Воно вібрало у собі, відвагу нашу нашій волі, загиблих друзів імена, читаю нашого вімолі, я полкового знамена, дивлюсь на нього я востаннє, у нез'ясованій журбі, всю кров мою, всі скитання, воно вібрало у собі, всю кров мою, всі скитання, воно вібрало у собі. Усе, що разом пережито, в обходах вистраждано все. Я знаю, інші гордовито прапороносець понесе. Дивлюсь на нього я востаннє, у нез'ясованій журбі, всю кров мою, всі скитання, воно
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 282 of the news.
And of course, we're going to be reporting on the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine here on day 282. But before we do, I've got to ask y'all, did y'all see the video that was put out today by me of me doing a Sam Elliott impression for the Stugna? If you did, let us know. If you haven't seen it, go check it out either during the stream or after the stream, because from what I've seen in the comments section, everyone thought it was really good. Of course, just going off of what they were saying. So go check it out for yourself and let me know if you enjoyed that, because if you did, I may make more videos like that with different kinds of voices doing different things. My mind was racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour today with all the different video ideas I could do that on. It's just hopefully people actually watch them. If we do that again, also just to let y'all know, we will be turning it into, I guess you could say, a short instead of an actual video. That was supposed to be a short that went up today, but because of the video file format, it was in the normal YouTube format, so then it ended up being a video instead of being a short. So we'll probably be doing those as shorts in the future. I thought it was really funny, and also I've seen a lot of people saying that they really liked it. So it's good to hear that y'all liked it. I like that. But with that, it's now time for us to move on from that little video today. That was a little bit of a goof and pretty fun to do. I love doing that one. That was really fun. And we're now going to be moving into the Bakhmut area. Because while we've been hearing some, I guess you could say, some troubling news, some concerning news about the Russians, and we'll move over to Deep State real quick, moving up onto the chicken tender and fighting onto the chicken tender and also holding the hill to the southeast, we have seen that the Russians appear to be preparing for defeat in this area as they're building one of the most extensive and, I guess you could say, high-tech defensive lines that they have built during the entirety of this war. Before we get to that front line, let's discuss what we have seen over the past 24 hours. And so going from November 30th, and we're going to zoom out so that way we can show the entirety of the Bakhmut front line. The furthest northern flank is in Soledar. The furthest southern flank is in Kurtumivka. And we can see here that when we fast forward to this day, Kurtumivka has been taken entirely. It appears that the Russians, if we go to Google Maps and look at the actual topography of the town, and let me go find it real quick. For some reason, it's always a really hard town to find. So let me go over here. Bakhmut is somewhere around here. There's Pokrovsk. So that means Bakhmut is in the area. Okay, here we go. Here's Bakhmut. So now we go down here to Kurtumivka, and here's the town that the Russians captured today. The other day, we saw that the Russians somehow successfully moved across the salt flats to the eastern side of the town, and we're now poised to move across the railroad tracks in the center of the town and on into the eastern side that is bordered by a canal. It appears that today, either the Ukrainians retreated out of the town or they were pushed out of the town by the Russian forces in the area, and we don't know how many casualties the Russians have taken. Going off of the terrain, we can assume that the casualties are actually quite high compared to the amount of ground they've taken. These salt flats are completely flat, and if we go to Deep State UA, we can actually see that there's a depression that one of these salt flats make. So the Russians would have had to advance practically into a bowl on the eastern side of the village where the Ukrainians could fire down into it and then come out the other side. So I'm assuming that they did take some significant casualties, especially for the village and the size that was captured, but we do not know how the Russians took this side of the town. Apparently, they just rolled over the railroad ties and into the other side of the town, because from what we can tell, based off of prior days' movements, they would have been moving westwards instead of north through the very small strait down here. It looks like that would be the most logical conclusion to this area, but this is not to be feared, and it's nothing incredibly severe. At this moment, according to Deep State UA, the Russian forces border the entirety of the railroad, and it's quite ironic because once they cross that railroad, they're going to be railroaded by Ukrainian forces in the fields beyond, because the railroad tie, well, I guess you could say the railroad track ballast that's under the railroad tracks is the only thing giving the Russians in this area any kind of cover. The only place that the Russians can move from here, considering that the canal appears to be uncrossable for the Russians, is that they could start to try and move north towards the next town, which we will change right here to English, so that way we can read them off correctly. And now we got to go all the way back down there. Sorry about that, everyone. But let me get back down here real quick. There's Bakhmut, so it'll be down here. And the only place they can move is Klishchivka. The difficulty that the Russians are going to face moving into the next village is that they have to first expose themselves over the railroad tie, and then secondly, they have to start advancing towards a ridge line. The ridge line dominates the entire area, all the way from the canal and all the way up towards Bakhmut itself. It actually makes up one of the hills that the Ukrainians control in the area of Bakhmut, and so they probably will take heavy casualties, or they'll be pinned down in this area and they'll rely on other areas to continue to move. But we're not seeing that in the Bakhmut area. The Russians have been stopped on the chicken tender. It appears that they were moving up the tail end of the chicken tender on the eastern side, and they've now been stopped about halfway up today. We also know that the large bulk of Russian forces are being directed at this northern area of Bakhmut. Apparently, a smaller group is focused in the south, and they are trying to push towards the area of Krasna Ora. So going off of all of this, it looks like the Ukrainians are putting up a strong enough defense, at least around Bakhmut city proper and the slightly northern flank of the town, to be able to hold the Russians back, although the Russians did make a small amount of ground in the Kurtamivka area. We're assuming, and hopefully this assumption is correct, that the terrain advantage that the Ukrainians will have in this area going on and further defending will be able to pin the Russians down, and we'll see that once again the battle will stall out. The only area that will be in question now is just the absolute horde of Russian forces that are actually just slightly north of Bakhmut on the chicken tender, and whether they're actually able to push the Ukrainians off that hill. If they push the Ukrainians off that hill and they get pushed into Bakhmut, we may see that this battle goes on for a good bit longer, considering that the Russians will control another dominating height over the town, and the Ukrainians and the Russians will pretty much be half and half and firing over Bakhmut at the ridges on both sides of the town. However, while all of this looks like it will become a Ukrainian victory and another Russian defeat in terms of the long run, it looks like the Russians are already preparing for defeat behind the lines, which is incredibly interesting to see if we look at this picture right here. We can see a load of pictures. We're not really sure who took these pictures, whether it was a Ukrainian drone taking them or whether it was a Russian drone taking them, but we have not seen anything like this in modern war, unless if you're talking about the Maginot Line or the Siegfried Line of the Second World War. These defenses are incredibly intricate, incredibly complicated. They're actually digging trenches now in proper zigzag lines. They have connecting trenches to each other, so they have front line trenches, connecting trenches, reserve trenches, and everything else in between, and it looks like they're really putting the maximum amount of effort here. Apparently, wherever this front line is, and we're assuming, well, not front line, a defensive line is, which is probably about 2 miles behind the front line right now, somewhere in between Popasna and Bakhmut, it appears that they're getting ready to fight for this tooth and nail, and that they're expecting the tides of war in the Bakhmut area to turn around completely out of their favor, and they'll be fighting on the defense again and trying to hold all of the ground that they can. Moving on to another picture, we can see it's unbelievable the effort that's been put into these trenches. It even looks like they've gone through the time and the commitment and also the cost to cover these sides of these trenches with wood and maybe even the flooring as well, which makes these trenches an incredibly high grade above normal trenches that we've seen both the Russians and the Ukrainians using. Due to them having wood planked floors, it's going to be a lot more difficult for Russian soldiers to get any kind of, I guess you could say, foot conditions where their feet are exposed for too long in wet, damp conditions that would lead them to have trench foot. And so the amount of times that these Russian units would have to be rotated out will probably be lower and help them to defend this line a little bit better. We can also move into the next picture, and once again, the defenses are extensive. We can see here what I'm assuming is a connecting trench, a frontline trench right here, a Russian armored personnel carrier, and what appears to be some checkpoints and I guess you could say, a flanking trench to protect their far flank in this area. It's extensive, and if we go through the rest of the pictures, I'm not going to provide incredibly detailed commentary on all of them, but they're really digging into the concept of trench warfare here. And it's getting very complicated. It's getting very advanced. Actually, I'm trying to even come up with the words for it. This is World War I level, or pre-war World War II levels of trench engineering we're seeing right here, which shows that the Russians have no confidence in their ground forces anymore to carry on the war, and they're almost going to be entirely relying on these poorly trained and poorly equipped soldiers to count on their defensives to keep them holding the ground and keep them alive. This one is actually just unbelievable. We actually had someone on stream last night, I forgot who it was, but I think you're probably here tonight again, say that one of the long straight line trenches we had seen a couple of days ago in another picture, not of these defenses, but of somewhere else, was a tank trap, and it wasn't wide enough for a tank trap then, but if you said that about this one, That is correct. This is such a wide trench that it's not made for infantry. We can also see that there's no accommodations for any infantry here. This was made along this tree line as an anti-tank trench. This is so wide that in theory, if a tank tried to drive over it, it would just lean down into the trench and it would get stuck there. It would require a recovery vehicle to be pulled out and then be operational again. So we're seeing it's had a load of effort put into it. This one is probably the most bizarre picture because if I showed this compared to, let me actually pull this up so that way you can see the significance of this. World War I trench aerial view. And let me see if I can find y'all a picture here of World War I trenches from an aerial view right here. And you can see how complex the trenches were. You can actually see no man's land right there in the middle. I'm assuming that, well, actually, I can't really assume either. I don't know which would be which. I'm probably assuming that these are the Allied trenches that the British would have had, because throughout most of World War I, they were the lower quality trenches, and these look to be more uniform in a way, and also it looks like it has a little bit more effort put into it just due to the depth of the trenches. So it looks like, you know, and we're getting into a little bit of rabbit hole here. These would be the German trenches, and if I had to compare these Russian trenches to anything, they're looking a lot like the modern equivalent of a German trench in the First World War. Like, they have a solid defensive front line, connecting trenches, reserve lines, and communications lines and everything. It's incredibly complicated. Now, the thing is, though, is that while trench warfare has survived into the modern day, these kinds of trenches with this kind of complexity that you see in the First World War generally died with the First World War. Mostly because of air support and also accurate artillery. Well, artillery becoming a lot more accurate. It started to fade away and disappear, and you would see that trenches would become more sparse and not a massive interconnected web. So these trenches, while incredibly well built and a massive monolithic structure in terms of its defensive abilities, could probably be overcome with the Ukrainian artillery mercilessly bombarding it over the course of several weeks. But then again, not really sure. I don't really know how this will turn out, but considering there's a lot of factors to mitigate the importance of these defenses, the poorly trained Russian troops that will be manning these defenses probably wouldn't be able to hold them for long. We may even see that they would get bombarded, it would shatter their morale, and they would begin to rout and leave openings in this defensive line. But it's just unbelievable. We can actually see a picture here of some soldiers, I'm assuming Russian. There's no identifying markers on them. This also kind of looks like Ukrainian camouflage, but we can see them looking over one of these anti-tank trenches, and the work that's been put into this, once again, is astounding. We've never seen this level of work put into anything before. We could even see anti-tank traps, otherwise known, these aren't actually known as hedgehogs. I don't really know what the name of these things are. I believe they're dragon's teeth or something similar. These have been used forever. You can actually see these in Germany at the Siegfried Line, and I'll show you all that real quick, because that's pretty crazy to see. Siegfried Line, and let me see if I can show you all a picture. Here we go, the Siegfried Line. Use the exact same kind of dragon's teeth, just spread out across the entire German frontier in between them and France for countless miles on end. It's bizarre to see that the Russians are pulling out tactics that are nearly 70 or 80 years old. The question will be, is it effective? And I feel like it most likely will make it a lot more difficult for the Ukrainians to push through these defenses and take that ground, but it's not going to be impossible. One thing that we have learned is that anything that the Russians do, even if they put a massive amount of effort into it like this, we saw these kinds of efforts in their infancy in the Bucha Hospital European battle, and it still didn't help them. In the end, the defenses would be surrounded, and then they would just retreat or they would surrender. So with that, that's the end of that.
They were able to get all this done.
I really am too. I don't know how many supply trucks and how much effort this required to be pulled off the front lines to do this kind of work, but considering that they put in such a massive investment into the lines right behind Bakhmut, I am certain that they're planning on this investment paying off. They're expecting that they will lose the Battle of Bakhmut and they will eventually be pushed back. Otherwise, why would they spend so much time, money, and effort digging and building these trenches way back where they wouldn't even matter if the Russians think the offensives aren't going to work?
Exactly.
So if one thing, while these look formidable, remember this: they're very formidable, yeah. But if they're building these miles behind the lines, it means that they're planning on losing. That's all that it means. There's not a lot to add into it. If you're building defenses, you're preparing to lose. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to the actual battles that have been occurring in the Bakhmut area, or the small snippets we've seen of them, and we're going to start down towards the Kurtamivka area, considering that that is the area that the Russians were able to take today. And so starting off, we can see that Ukrainian soldiers got into some heavy combat with some Russian soldiers in the area. You hear the firefight going on? You now see him loading his... What is that? What is that?
That, let's see.
It doesn't really look like
That's
an
strange.
AR. It looks like something else.
No, it might be an AR, actually.
Let us know in the chat. If y'all know what kind of gun that is, please share it with us. Because it kind of looks like an AR in some ways, but it doesn't in others. Like, for example, Matthew, the upper receiver doesn't look like an AR-15. And also, that's the charging handle. And it's up at the front of the receiver instead of at the rear, where you know have to pull that thing back like a Hot Wheels toy or a Beyblade.
Look at that that broomstick foregrip on that thing. That is huge.
That thing is massive. Honestly, though, I like the longer vertical foregrips. I don't like the stubby ones, because the stubby ones make you feel that if you ever slip your hand, you just lose the grip of the foregrip. That one's so long that it's almost like a double-handed vertical foregrip. So honestly, I like that. You hear the fire coming in pretty heavily. You now see the Ukrainian firing over the trench. Not bracing it, but it seems and it sounds that the Russians are so close that if he stood up tall enough to be able to brace it and then fire at them, he might be shot. And of course, a lot of you are going to be like, but you never gave the Chechens that credit. That's because you could hear that the firefight was 300 yards away from them, or there wouldn't be a firefight at all, and they would still be shooting like that, expecting to hit something nearly 3 football fields away. This guy sounds like he's trying to shoot at people nearly 60 meters in front of him, or 60 yards in front of him, and so he's just trying to fire over and maybe keep their heads down so that way they don't move on to him. And I've seen a lot of people explaining what kind of rifle this is, and looking at that right there, that certainly is not an AR-15, but someone said...
I don't think that's a SCAR either.
It's definitely not a SCAR, it's definitely not an AR either. I actually saw someone say that it's a Polish Grot rifle. So let's pull up the Grot rifle. Yep, that's it. Yeah, wow, that guy, Jakub Sebela got that literally on the mark right there. There's the charging handle. There's the exact same, I guess you could say, handguard at the front. That's identical. Even the brace is identical.
And it's modular too. Look at that more broken down version, like it's a bullpup. Do you see that?
Let's see, this one right here. Oh my!
Yeah, that's cool. It can flip around into a bullpup. That is like a pretty cool design.
How does that work? I swear, that's got to be a totally different receiver, because there's absolutely no way you can just flip around like the modular pieces and make it into a bullpup. If that is the case, this is probably the coolest rifle I've ever seen. I'm not a big fan of bullpups, to be honest. I have held them before, and they feel very heavy in the rear part of the gun. That's because that's where pretty much everything in the gun is, and so it always feels like it's trying to tilt up on you, like where the barrel is trying to tilt up into the air. I'm not really a big fan of that. If they can fix the balancing issues on these bullpups, I would be a fan of them, because I do think they look pretty neat. But in actual use, I don't really like how the weight's distributed. But I'm gonna find out on that one, Matty. Is that actually how it works? Can you just flip that thing around and have a bullpup?
I think that's the case, because they're showing it in multiple pictures.
Oh, wait a minute. No, it's different classes. This is a Grot C and this is a Grot B. So it's like a different variant. It's kind of like an F-35A and then an F-35B, with one being a VTOL and the other one not being a VTOL. But that's
I was about to say, that was designed back in 2007, and they were way ahead of their time if you could flip that around into a bullpup. Somebody needs to actually do that.
I've got huge... I don't... Honestly, man, I don't know how they would do that. Because you've got to think, right here with the Model C down here at the bottom, the bullets feed directly up into the bolt, which is in front of the trigger, and then it's chambered into the barrel. With a bullpup, however, all of that action is happening well behind the trigger, like you can see right here. It's happening almost 6 inches back. So I wonder how you would make a modular system where you could just flip that around.
I wonder. I'm not a weapons designer, so I'm not going to pretend like I know.
Someone needs to get on that. Watch this video. Wouldn't this be funny? Like we're all talking about this, and then someone in our live chat's listening, and then like a month from now they send us a picture, and they're like, "Hello, Enforcer man. I love your channel. I just want to let you know I actually figured out the fix to that problem. We actually have a standard rifle that can be converted into a bullpup." That would be.
And we'll take our royalties too. Also, wouldn't that be cool if like the executive of like a gun company like SIG was watching? That'd be pretty cool.
That would be. Hey, if you're an executive of SIG and you are watching right now, or any company for that matter, please try and make that happen. I know it will probably be incredibly expensive, but at least make a few prototypes to let us see if that is practical, or at least even triable or doable, because that would be really interesting. Anyways, with that, we need to move on from that. Still an incredibly cool rifle. It looks quite well, and I'm sure that it uses a 5.56 round, or it can use the 7.62. So it actually uses two of the most common ammunitions that you would find in Poland. Of course, you would have to have different barrels, because of different calibers, but still, it can use both of them. It has a pretty decent rate of fire on auto mode. And I hate full auto. I don't know why people say full auto, because if it's auto, it's already full auto. There's no more auto you can get. You can't get ultra and ultra max auto. It's just auto. But anyways,
have you seen the new fully semi-automatic guns?
Yes, I have. By the way,
cringe.
I don't want to get into this too much, but did you know, Matthew, that when the 1911 was introduced into service, it was actually called an automatic pistol?
You're kidding.
Yeah, it was, because back in the day, there were like a semi-automatic pistol for an average soldier was automatic because it's self-loaded. So it automatically did that entire process. Of course, by that point, they had double-action revolvers, but this thing still removed all of the work of spinning a cylinder or anything, and it just automatically reloaded itself every time you fired. So the old manuals for the 1911 called it an automatic, although nowadays it's called a semi-automatic, which is kind of an interesting little historical wordage change because of how weapons evolved and how automatic became semi-automatic, and then automatic became automatic.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, kind of interesting. I want to find a manual. World War II, 1911 manual cover. Or I can find a World War I manual. Now let me see if I can find an actual original one. Because if I can, it will say automatic. I can't find it. No one's really into selling them. They're only into selling the guns. So sadly, I can't find the manual that says that. Dang it. Dagnabbit. I'll try and find y'all an excerpt maybe in the future if I make a video from a World War I book called Doughboy War, and every single soldier that ever had the 1911 in that book and talked about it after the war called it an automatic. And also they said that the here we go. There it is. There is an actual World War I era manual from 1918. It says Manual of the Automatic Pistol, caliber 45, model of 1911. It's not semi-automatic on that manual, it's automatic. That is just really cool to me, how the wordage changed over time. Because, once machine guns, you can have the power of a machine gun in your hand with a submachine gun, then that started to change the wordage of automatic into being semi-automatic, and then those things were the automatic guns. So anyways, with that, it's time for us to move on and get out of all of the neat, interesting wordage stuff that's changed over time. And with that, it's now time for us to actually move a little bit more rearwards, where we could see in the area of Kurtamivka some Ukrainian helicopters flying low over a village on their way to the area. Also, some of y'all might be interested to see that there is no visual or visible snow in any of these videos here in the south near Kurtamivka. That's because we found out, and me trying to figure out how to accurately report this news, the snow starts somewhere around Soledar, and then further up it just gets thicker the further north you go on the front line. So in the area of Kurtamivka, they're actually not dealing with some of the god-awful mud that they're dealing with in the north. They still have some of it, but it's not as heavy, and also it's not as snowy, of course. It's still green out. With that, we can see the helicopter flying right over the guy's head. You see another one flying over as well, and hopefully they're firing off some rockets near the Kurtamivka area that keeps the Russians at bay and allows the Ukrainians to regroup and prepare a new defensive position outside of the village. With that, we're now going to be moving up towards the town of Odradivka, where we saw that some Belarusian volunteers pinned down some Russians in no man's land. And so, here's the video. When you hear the fire coming in, when you hear some bullets bouncing off the ground, and oh, buddy, it's a machine gun.
Зажимай, я навел.
Oh, and he's treating it like one, man.
Yes, sir.
Give it to him.
Стой. Чуть-чуть правее, нахуй. Айда.
Look at all those spent casings.
Yeah, I mean, like, they're just piling them up here, man. There's a mountain of brass and steel down there below that gun. And also, notice this. The firefight was going on and bullets were bouncing off the ground all around them until they started firing off that 50 caliber, and then the whole firefight just stops instantly.
Хуять.
Oh, man. Also, that's an epic outro. Like, wow, they're really upping the outro game for the Belarusian volunteers. And also, another thing that's incredibly cool about this video, and also something that I've had experience with before, because I have shot a 50 caliber machine gun like this one, the M2, and what's really weird about a machine gun like this is if you ever get the opportunity to shoot one, you don't really, it doesn't even feel like the gun is in your control. And what I mean by that, I'm not trying to make it sound scary or anything, it's just that it isn't like a normal gun. When you have a normal gun and you shoot it like a normal long rifle, you feel like the gun and you are kind of like one and the same, I guess you could say. You're all part of one singular unit. When you're operating something like the M2, it just feels so foreign, even when you're trying to use it. It's on either a tripod or some kind of a mount, and you're also just pushing down these two little thumb triggers at the back of the machine gun, and you don't really feel any of the recoil, although it feels like your whole face is just, all the bones inside your face are kind of shaking apart. It's really weird to fire one of these things in real life, and I highly encourage that if you ever get the chance to experience something like this, if for some reason you can, I would highly suggest you do. It's really something just to say you've done and also tell people about, but it's just really bizarre. And also, Plexus said, that's normal for calibers above 50, and I bet you it is, but it's still just very weird coming from the experience of shooting somewhat larger caliber guns like 30-06, which, you know, I guess in the rifle world these days is a little bit of a larger caliber, and then going up to something like that, and the experience is completely foreign from anything you've done before. And really, I can see now, you know, after doing that, why there is different training for heavy weapons in the military, because you cannot take the normal experience of a small arm like a rifle and then take it into a heavy machine gun like the 50 caliber, because it's just entirely different. Also, it's mechanically different. Anyways, with that, it's now time for us to move on from the Belarusian volunteers doing their part to make sure that the front lines are held down, and we're now going to be moving on into the next area of the front line. This video was taken, we're supposing, somewhere around the southeastern ridge of where the Russians were, and we can see that the Ukrainians were dropping grenades onto the Russian positions. When you see right here, some pretty good piano music that we have to mute, and a whole bunch of Russians convening for the trash heap. You see, Russians have this cultural practice where they all get together and they sort through all of the trash and then they throw it outside to make sure that the Ukrainians know that that's a Russian position. It looks like the Ukrainians have done it now, Matthew. They've evolved. It is literally the ghetto bomb with a red solo cup and an F1
It's a
grenade.
bomblet in a cup. Wow.
You know, Matthew, that sounds like something that you would hear in Wall-E. You know, like, we have a birthday cake in a cup. We have an F1 grenade in a cup. When you see the bomblet now on its way, when you see the cup is detached from the grenade, it appears that the grenade has stayed right there. And does it explode? It's taking quite a while. If it is going to explode, it's either an old fuse. It did not explode. We can now see the next one being dropped. The cup went flying again. The grenade landed right on top of the dugout, right near the lip, but it appears that it wasn't in front of the opening where the shrapnel would have gone inside. They're now dropping another one.
The Russians are probably so stupid in the trench they come out. Who is it, Ivan?
Wait
Go
a minute.
check.
They did. Did you see that? He did.
Oh, they came out to see who it was?
Yeah, look. Look, there goes one. He's scurrying into the bunker. Another guy went running the other way, and it exploded. It looks like no one got had by that one. But they still came out into the open. And Matthew was literally saying, imagine if the Russians were that dumb to do it. And they were doing it. And that was probably the weirdest
Grubhub.
thing.
Go answer the door, Ivan.
Also, look at that one. This one was nuts. It looks like it was in the cup. And as soon as they let go of the cup, the pin was pulled. And the grenade is now alive, free falling through the air. I wonder if it explodes midair. Oh, wait a minute. That was actually a pretty good malfunction right there, because now that the grenade had separated itself from the cup on the drone, it was already live, and as soon as it hit the ground, literally within a split second, it exploded. Perfect timing right there. We now see that they have another one even. I don't know how many of these kinds of bomblets the drones are able to carry, but it seems like either they have a lot of drones carrying these, or one drone can carry a lot of these bomblets. We now see him dropping that one. It did not detach from the cup in flight. Wow, that was a spin. And that one went right into the dugout door. Ooh, that got him. You know that got him.
Am I right when the grenade goes down into the trench or the hole there, that the shockwave is like amplified throughout the rest of it?
Yeah, you know, in a way it is. Like, if you're talking about, like, if it lands in the trench and it explodes, all of the force and the shrapnel of it is pretty much going to be going down the two lateral directions to the left or right of it in the trench. And if it falls for some reason in a dugout, all of the explosive force is contained into that one area. It isn't really allowed to disperse. That's why everyone was surprised in the Second World War when I believe it was Operation Valkyrie, where they tried to kill Hitler in the bunker in like 1943 or 1944, and the bomb went off and several people were killed, but he wasn't. It was almost unbelievable because the concrete room should have just amplified the power of the explosion and pretty much killed everyone, but it didn't. So no one really had an understanding of how he even survived that, but that would be similar. The theory there would be very similar to this one.
Interesting.
But to answer the question in short, Matthew, if it lands in the trench, everyone's getting a white Lotta.
Well then.
And we can see them looking into the trench, observing if there's any movement. There wasn't any. And so we may be seeing that may be the end of it for those guys.
They have to be taking this drone back to the launch site to reload it, because there's no way they're carrying that many.
There's no way. Like, that's what I'm saying. This thing's probably like a DJI Mavic, and you and I know how big that thing is. It's not carrying like 10 of these things. And you know how heavy a grenade weighs, too. It's like 2 pounds. You know, and I know that little drone can't carry that for long. It's probably up there in the air going... You know, like the engines are seizing and crap. But that one landed almost right into a dugout as well. We can now see the next bomb falling. It looks like this one fell onto a scar mark on the land. It did. So it doesn't appear to have caused any more damage than a hole in the ground. Oh, wait a minute. That right there, Matthew, was that made of copper? Well, no, it wasn't made of copper. But look at that thing. That's like a toy. That's like a toy you would give a kid.
I would love to have a model of that on my desk. That is like a perfect decoration. I hate they're blowing it up.
I know. It also is so nice. It's shiny. It's stainless steel. I mean, that thing is actually pretty nice. And it's a huge change from the bombs we've been seeing so far. We now see it falling down into that trench. And you can also see how effective these are compared to the F1 grenades. That thing was dropped in a straight line. It did not get thrown around by the wind, thanks to its fins and also the teardrop shape of it. It went right down to where it was supposed to go, and it exploded right on top of it. You can see how much of a difference there is in a small modification to what's a normal grenade versus an actual proper bomblet like that one. We can see that that one actually fell in the trench and exploded right inside of it. White Lottas for all. And you know what the Russian motto is, Matthew. Oppression and white Lottas for all. And it looks like they're keeping up with the motto these days. And I hope that they remember that next time they say the pledge of Russian, I guess you could say, indentured servitude. And so with that, we're now going to be moving into Bakhmut itself. And I've seen the craziest thing. This isn't really frontline news in a way, but it is war news. And considering that Bakhmut is now a frontline town, this is probably the craziest thing I've seen. Almost the whole town's been evacuated. No one's there anymore. It is a war zone. A lot of it's been destroyed. But the trash is still running. They're still picking up trash.
Now that's dedication.
That is dedication. This is the kind of stuff they talk about in like wars in the future, like as something just to show how nonchalant people were. It's like, you know, the front line was going on, hundreds of people, thousands of people were getting killed a day, both in the town and at the front line. But the trash was still running. Someone 80 years in the future, Matthew, is going to be interviewed about surviving the Battle of Bakhmut, like a 8-year-old kid, and they're going to be like, I can't really remember a lot about the war, but I remember in the middle of an artillery barrage watching some trashmen outside throwing trash into the back of a trash truck. And that's really the only thing I can remember. Someone's going to say that in the future.
Ну,
And just look at this, it's
герои в
insane.
Бахмуте на каждом шагу. Вон вверху дымит, где-то прилет метров за 200. Они мусор
Now, I gotta give
вывозят.
these guys a lot of credit for not giving a literal damn about the entire war that's going on top of them. It's literally on top of them, and they're still going to do their job and still get paid. And I gotta just respect the commitment right there to their job.
Рашка! Да вы сдохнете.
This guy is hyped watching this trash job going on.
This man finds joy in everything.
А тут под обстрелами чистоту наводят.
Man, he is getting worked up.
Man, honestly, I'm kind of getting worked up too, because it's insane to see these guys doing this, knowing that we've watched Bakhmut get literally reduced to rubble in most places, and yet these guys are still out here doing the trash. I mean, like, that is just dedication on a whole other level right there. And also it shows how little they care. But with that, we're now going to be moving out of Bakhmut from this insane but really funny to see scene. And we're now going to be moving, believe it or not, out of the Bakhmut area because we've covered all of the news concerning the place. One thing that I have seen that's interesting is that the further north we have gone, the less news we get from both sides. It appears that the snow may have stopped the Russians and the Ukrainians for the time being, considering that the snow starts somewhere in the Soledar area and goes further north, and we're not seeing a lot of activity from any of those areas. It may be indicating that the snow will actually stop both forces, and the only fighting we'll see will be contained in the Bakhmut area, the farthest northern fringe of the front line that may be usable, and all the way down into the southern front. And so if any offensives or defensive actions at this point, going off of the current trend, are going to happen, it will either be the Russians towards Zaporizhia, the Ukrainian towards Melitopol, or the Russians pushing towards Bakhmut. Those are really the only three that it appears to be viable right now, because while we've seen a lot of Ukrainian movement in the north every once in a while, it does appear that the snow has stopped them as well. But we'll have to keep an eye on that and look into that going into the future. That may be true, maybe not. Only time will tell. But we're now going to be moving out of Ukraine and on into Russia, into the far east of Russia, beyond the Ural Mountains and almost all the way towards Lake Baikal, in the town of Krasnoyarsk. Now, real quick, I want to share with y'all what this town looks like, because it's always interesting to take a look at what Russian towns actually look like. A nation with $1.3 trillion of gross domestic product per year, and also only 110 million people, I believe, at this point. So let's drop down and let's see what it looks like. Whew. Yikes. That's rough.
It has that that kind of like drab kind of China communist look to it, like the apartment blocks.
You know what this kind of reminds me of? That right out there at some point in the 60s or the 70s was the Soviet utopia, what Marxism and Leninism was supposed to produce, and then right out here on the outskirts is the reality of what the Soviet Union still was. Which was a country that was underdeveloped, trying to pretend like it was advanced and modern, but this is really what it was. It doesn't even look... Of course, these people have electricity. That's one thing they have to guarantee. But these houses probably don't have sewage or anything similar, and there's literally a junkyard down there. And so this is Krasnoyarsk. If y'all are wondering what this town looks like, this is what it is. And I honestly got to say, I know that it's kind of become a little bit common for us to laugh at the state of the Russian Federation and what it really is, but you kind of got to feel sorry for people like these, whose faces are blurred out, because they grow up in this kind of world. It's an incredibly backwards place compared to the Western world, and yet they're told their entire lives, and they get fed this lie so much that it becomes reality and the only truth they know, that this right here is the best thing on earth. And that the Russian government, who keeps them in these kinds of conditions by being on edge with the entire Western world and also incurring sanctions and suffering trade-wise because of it, tells them that the Russian government actually cares for them, and that these kinds of living conditions are some of the best you'll ever find in the world. It's really just unbelievable to think that these poor people live like this. And
that must feel absolutely hopeless to live in a place like that.
It is, and I bet you that's probably a reason why they have a cultural dependency on alcohol, because living in these kinds of conditions and knowing that there's no way up, no matter what you do, there's just not enough money in the Russian Federation to ever make it, unless if you're an oligarch or born into it. And those are the only ways that you can actually have any money in Russia, and everyone else just lives like this. Or you live in one of these old apartments that are now about 50 or 60 years old. probably with a lot of problems of their own, and you try and make that work. In fact, let's go over there to that area, and let's see what that looks like in it, because it's right here, so might as well just go to it. I bet you this is the only nice part of Krasnoyarsk, if I had to take a bet. And it looks nicer than where we came from, that is true, but you can still see that it is pretty bad off. This is literally prefab. This is a Khrushchevka, a commie block. These things, let me fill y'all in on a little story about these commie blocks here. These things like this one were only supposed to last about 20 years. When these things went up under Khrushchev's reign in the 50s and 60s, the Russian government was just trying to make a temporary fix to the housing crisis in the country, and it was planned on that eventually they would move the people out of these apartments and into actual permanent, well-made ones. Well, in the end, if you ever look at Soviet history, Russia never really economically rebounded. The 60s and the 50s were about the best time for the Russians in all regards economically. They're actually kind of on par with the West at that time, and you would see that their technology would begin to drop off after that time, mostly because they didn't have modern computation technology. And so there was really no way for them to build the permanent housing that these people were supposed to live in. And so a lot of people, even to this day in Russia, live in buildings that are nearly 60 and 70 years old that were only rated to survive for about 20 years. And that is pitiful when you really think about it. These people live in these kinds of squalor conditions, really thanks to the Soviet government and now the modern Russian government, and neither of them have really done anything to try and fix the problems for these people.
It's pitiful.
It is just, it's next level pitiful. And you can even see on the side of this building the kind of decay that they're even having externally, and you can only imagine what kind of true decay is under that facade. Like, it's horrendous all around. But speaking of Krasnoyarsk, we've seen that some kind of sabotage has occurred in this town as the largest mall in Krasnoyarsk caught on fire. And not just in any part of the mall, and actually caught on fire right under the massive Z symbol that was put on it. So we're largely thinking that this may be an attempt of sabotage in Krasnoyarsk, and so here's the video. We can see right here they have the entire fire brigade out there, and they're trying to put out this fire. It looks like it's eating up some of the Z as well.
Well, at least they'll stay warm.
Yeah, I mean, at least some people are staying warm. Also, why does that sound like a U.S. Navy siren? You know, that you hear on those little away boats when they're coming in the port, you know, they go... That sounds just like it. Let's listen to that again. Attention on deck!
The Russian Navy responds to a building fire.
Yeah, the Moskva has just come out of the Black Sea and it's on its way to Krasnoyarsk over land. But with that, that's the end of that video, and it's pretty interesting to see that this mall is caught on fire, and of course in such a interesting part with the Z symbol on it, which is leading this more so into the idea of sabotage over anything else. But with that, it's now time for us to move on to Krasnoyarsk again, because I was wanting to show y'all something incredibly interesting about this town. If you take a look at this town, you can actually see, I guess you could say, the divide in old Krasnoyarsk, or at least very old Krasnoyarsk, with the older, I guess you could say, houses that were built during early Soviet times or imperial times, and then you can see that the Soviets would just bulldoze allotment areas like this, and then they would build the commie blocks. And what's interesting enough, and I'm sure that this would actually be cool to do, I think it would be cool to make a Soviet video series, but, you know, my plate's already very full, it probably wouldn't happen, but these buildings, like these designs, are literally, like, if you look at them, Matthew, in a Soviet archive, if they're still around, this design would be called something like Design Bureau Building Design Number 91227, or something like that. Like, everything was just built to get a job done. It wasn't really built with any kind of character or anything like that. It was just built to, I guess you could say, house people, so that way they could go to the factory the next day and pump out some steel for the Soviet Union.
And also look at the landscaping, too. It's like just straight up dirt.
Yeah, or it was very cheap, and it was a very shoddy attempt at trying to create anything. And interestingly enough, you can actually find stuff like this in the United States, but it's on a whole different level. This right here, in Soviet times, and also in modern times, is usually considered the higher-end housing in most places in Russia. You would not want, unlike America, where you want to have a detached house, you would not want a detached house in Russia because they're usually of such poor quality. You want to end up in an apartment because while they're still poor quality, usually they're better maintained by a little bit than these houses. And if you come to the United States, you'll see buildings very similar to this, but they take on an entirely different role. If we go to New York City, what is the name of the lower end of town in New York City, Matthew? The one where they have the massive buildings, the like
Rockaway.
I think it is. Where? Oh, how do you spell that again?
It's a far space Rockaway.
Far Rockaway.
It's a pretty rough neighborhood down there.
In Queens. I think this is it. Let me see the pictures. Maybe I can find it. No, I don't think that one's it. It's another building, I believe. Yeah, right here. That's it. If you look at these buildings right here, that's the American equivalent to a Soviet Khrushchev Gakami block. But these things were made. They were literally built as the last resort. In Russia, these things would be considered the peak of luxury for most common people. In America, this was rock bottom. This right here is Section 8 housing. And in the United States, this is for people who can't really afford a normal house and they're on government-assisted living, and so they live here. And it's very bizarre to think about that, and that really shows you how much of a step above Russia the United States is, just as a country of its own, that these buildings right here, which look even better than the nicest apartment buildings in Krasnoyarsk, are the bottom of the rung here in the United States, but in Russia, that's the top. Like, that really shows you how big of a difference it is. And Britain has a different kind. They actually have, we call that Section 8. Here in the United States, they have what's called estate housing, which is the exact same thing. It looks a little different, though. They usually try to design it in very weird, brutalist ways in Britain. Honestly, those would be a whole bunch of videos that would actually be interesting to cover. And I've seen some people asking if we would make specific rabbit hole videos where I just talked about that random stuff and just pulled up tabs on my computer. And those might be so easy, I could actually do those. But I really want to get to Chinese news next because, you know, considering that, you know, we have kind of been shadow banned, I don't really think there's much of a problem going into something that would probably get a shadow ban. So with that, well, because we've already been shadow banned, to make sure I finish out that thought before I move on to the next thing. So with that, we're now going to be moving out of Russia. Once again, really interesting to see. And we're going to be moving into Ukraine again. Well, actually, before we get to Ukraine again, I want to go down to Turkey because I saw something today, Matthew, I never even knew existed. Would you like to take a shot at the weirdest thing I've seen today?
I have no remote idea.
You wouldn't believe it, but Turkey has these merchant ships that have been converted into floating power stations. That's one of them.
Oh, I
right
was
there.
told by that. Yeah, I was told by that. I can't remember who told me, but somebody told me in Discord.
This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I never heard of an actual ship whose entire job was to be a temporary power generator. That's
smart. Like, just pull up right in the bay and hook up. That's very smart.
You know what I was thinking with this is that this is the perfect thing for a third world country that's trying to develop. Just lend some money from some foreign banks and have one of those things pull up and start supplying the entire city with electricity. Hopefully it would be cheap. I'm assuming that, you know, it wouldn't be an economically viable venture if it wasn't cheaper than an alternative. And then they could start to hopefully develop their country going forward and just use that thing as the power station for one of their developing cities. That is just incredibly neat as a concept. Like, hell, imagine if the United States had one of these things during Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. You know, I'm sure that would have helped out, at least getting the grid back up a little bit sooner. But anyways, moving on from all the hypotheses and ideas that we can come up on this power generating ship, the idea is simply electrifying, and it looks like the Turks are going to be sending several of these. Let's see, it says we'll send ships of power plants to Ukraine. That doesn't really get us a specific number, but we do know that there's apparently 3 ships that will be heading to Ukraine, and each one can provide 300 with a total capacity of 300 megawatts. So I'm assuming that each ship is 100 megawatts apiece. And how much is 300 megawatts? Let's see how much power. Let's see, how many homes can 1 megawatt power? Let's see, equals the same amount of electricity consumed by 400 to 900 homes in a year. And so a single ship going on the higher end with 900. And we're assuming that Ukrainian power usage would be somewhat low. So 900 times 300. These ships, all 3 of these ships in total, can power 270,000 homes. So that's actually pretty high.
That's crazy,
Yeah,
honestly.
that's actually pretty crazy, and hopefully these can be used quite well, and hopefully can run the blockade, or at least enter safely, so that way they can help out with...
Now, now, real quick, one thing I just saw Paula McDonald say, and I was thinking this too. It seems like Russia might end up turning this into a target. It seems like that would be something they might want to hit.
They might try and do that, but then again, we have to remember that is a massive Turkish flag on the side of that ship, and Turkey does have NATO protection. Now, NATO protection doesn't, I believe, extend into Ukraine, but it is a NATO ship, and so, you know, depending on however they want to interpret the charter, because while the charter wordage is somewhat clear, interpretation always leaves room for vague spots. Like you know, you can sit there and have something as clear as, you know, like, for example, this is probably a good one because I bet everyone's heard of this one before. The 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. There are a million interpretations as to what that really means. Some people say you can kill in self-defense. Some people say you can kill on behalf of a nation if they've told you to go to war or something, or you can't kill at all. There's a whole bunch of interpretations of that very simple statement because there's still a lot of room for it. And so while the NATO charter always appears to be very straightforward in what it means and how it can actually be used, still, NATO could interpret that article to mean that if this ship was attacked, that's an attack upon NATO, and that invokes Article 5. And the Russians may be scared that it will be interpreted that way and avoid hitting that ship, or they'll make such a big deal of that ship even attempting to go to Ukraine that it will never make it there for that to be a problem. One or the other. But it's still just such an interesting concept. The world every day at this point is baffling me with the kind of technological innovations that have been made that you never really hear about. Like, this would be a really cool video series. And I'm always talking about how cool video series would be, Matthew. And I'm sorry, everyone, if y'all think that these ever will become one. It's always just me shooting off ideas for the most part. But that would be such a cool video series if we went and looked at very rare and unspoken things like power generating ships and stuff like that. Because no one knows of these things. Like, I didn't even know this existed until today.
And you know something else? I was looking at the name on the side of that ship, and I think the Smithsonian Channel might have a documentary about this ship because I recognize that name from somewhere.
I wonder, but that's still incredibly, it's just incredibly cool to me. I think that's really neat. And so with that, I hope that addresses that little bit of news fairly well. And now it's time for us to move on into Ukraine. And it's time for us to move into the location unknowns first, and then start moving our way through some of the more inactive areas of the front lines, such as the northeast, and also further south in Donetsk, although there is still news to cover, and Donetsk has started to get a little bit more active than normal, although it's usually a static area. And so with that, let's get to the polls.
I think it's time for the polls, isn't it?
It is time for the polls.
All right. So the first poll said, "Do you think Russia will certainly lose Bakhmut in a very fast time frame?" It looks like 58% said yes, Ukraine will have it. 25% said not sure, and 17% said no, don't count Russia out yet. Now, I would have to agree with the 58%. I think Ukraine will keep it, but it looks like 17% said no. So, Enforcer, what say you?
Can you reread the prompt on that poll again real quick? Because I actually saw something in the chat that was pretty interesting.
Do you think Russia will certainly lose Bakhmut in a very fast time frame?
I believe that they will lose it. I hate to say that. I think that Bakhmut is once again going to be a lengthy battle. It probably will last another month, I'm thinking. Because unlike other areas where the terrain was incredibly flat, and so it was very easy to move across and also swipe the Russians off the field with some precise artillery strikes, in this area it will be a little bit more difficult, considering that there are a lot of hills around Bakhmut. They're not incredibly high, actually. They're only like 300 feet high. You know, these are not massive hills by most metrics around the world, but in Ukraine, these things are monoliths. They may as well be mountains as far as Ukrainian terrain is concerned, and considering that the Russians are currently fighting on the chicken tender, and they do have a massive amount of forces at the chicken tender, it's something like 3 or 4 BTGs, we're assuming. If they are able to push onto it and take it, the Ukrainians, to try and push the Russians back, will have to push back up onto the chicken tender and then retake it before they can push further. Because if they try and bypass the tender and move in down the road just south of the chicken tender, I'm saying that way too much, the Russians can fire onto them and inflict some heavy casualties. So they would have to take the hills surrounding Bakhmut before they could push them back. And considering the just sheer bulk of Russian forces that are in this area, it's not due to the Russians training. It's not because the Russians, you know, are going to win. but it's just because of the sheer bulk, and that's the only saving grace that Russia has, is that they have numbers, and they put a massive amount of them in this incredibly small area. And so the Ukrainians are literally going to have to pretty much sweep a mass like roach infestation out of the way with the number that's there. It's like getting out the Orkin spray in an infested house and trying to spray it down before they can say that the place is clear and they can push them on out. So it's going to be, in my opinion, it's not going to be an easy battle. This is going to be a pretty rough battle. It's also an incredibly rough battle for the Russians, because you can see, even with like 12 BTGs in this area, over 10,000 soldiers, they're still making almost no ground whatsoever because the terrain is so difficult to fight over, and the Ukrainians can see them almost everywhere they are and fire at them from miles away without the Russians even knowing where the fire is coming from. So in my opinion, I think this will actually be one of the lengthier and bloodier battles, just because of the terrain around Bakhmut and the difficulties that it'll provide to both sides. And so with that, do you have anything to add to it?
So nothing to add to that one, but we do have a second poll, and it says, what do you think of the U.S. president suggesting he is open for talks with Vladimir Putin? It looks like 60% said that's not a good gesture, bad idea, 21% said not sure, and 19% said peace is preferable, good call. Now, on this one, I'm going to have to say that is a bad idea, because I don't think it's the United States' place to be acting as if we're going to make decisions for Ukraine. I think we should defer to them. Simply because we're providing weapons does not give us the right to basically take over like the decision-making process. But Enforcer, what say you?
1 second. I want to make sure that I have a little bit more information going into this one real quick. So let me pull that up. Let's see. Yeah, that's, I read up on that a little bit on the second screen. I don't even get what the hell the point of that, of saying that is. Just hear me out for a second, everyone. It's not.
Hey,
really...
wait, Enforcer, real quick. Let me preface it with this. He said with conditions, by the way. He would speak with Russia with conditions, but that does not negate the fact that he would entertain a talk with Putin.
Well, the thing is that considering the vague wordage of that, unlike Zelensky, who has laid out his conditions for peace talks, where we know what will be acceptable and not. In the U.S., you know, this is one, and all of y'all have grown up here in the United States, our American viewers, knowing the American political system. If a politician at all from any party says that it will be with conditions, who the hell knows what the conditions are? It could be that the Ukrainians have to give up even more land than what the Russians control right now. You never really know the kind of conditions that these people are talking about, unless if it's clearly laid out, and they never clearly lay it out. And so I would say that that's, number one, not ideal. The Ukrainians need to continue to fight, and and I know some people are gonna be like, but you said the other day they might not want to take over Crimea. No, I'm all for them to retaking everything, including Crimea. Crimea, though, is a little bit of a tricky subject just because of how important it is for Russia strategically and how they're going to view the Ukrainians pushing back into it, because it'll be a serious concern for them strategically long term. But they need to continue on this war, and they need to continue to push the Russians out of the country. This land is Ukrainian, and there are millions of people right now behind these front lines that are going to be without any kind of hope, without any kind of recourse, if the United States tries to step in and bully the Ukrainians into surrendering. If anything, we need to make sure that we continue on the road we've been going on, which is the continuous support we've been providing, along with really just taking a bit of a back step from it. The United States, if anything, should not try and push peace negotiations. We should wait until the peace negotiations start to naturally occur again in between the Ukrainians and the Russians, and then step in as a third-party mediator. And honestly, then, I don't think we would be a good third-party mediator, because the Russians will consider us to be a biased mediator. We might want to find a country, for example, Switzerland, that could mediate. They're usually the mediator. They were the mediator before the war started. And I think that if anyone should step in and try and get any kind of peace agreements in between Ukraine and Russia, it should most likely be the Swiss, because they're the about as true neutral as you can get third-party mediator, which would keep both sides in the talks for longer and hopefully allow for more to be done. But that was
I think the appropriate thing to say would be, we're going to continue to support Ukraine. It's ultimately their decision. But if Zelensky wishes to call on the United States assistance in negotiating, then we're more than happy to help. But to sort of act as if we're going to be the deciding factor there kind of seems a little presumptuous.
Yeah, I've had some viewers, man, they're like, but But Matthew, because I've seen this one, Matthew, as a critique on here. But Matthew thinks the United States is on top of the world. Why are they saying this now? The United States is the leading country in the Western Hemisphere, but that doesn't mean that we get to go in and step into this war, which we're hardly involved in beyond the support that we're providing to Ukraine, and then start to act like we can dictate to everyone, both the Ukrainians and the Russians, how it's going to go. That doesn't even make any sense. We're trying to get them into we're trying to bring Ukraine into the Western fold. We're not trying to sit there and piss them off to where they'll just end up being a neutral country. There's a lot strategically involved for us as well. If Ukraine joins NATO, we're in a great position going forward. And so we don't want to sit there and get them pissed off, or then they just go, well, you know what? Since everyone's really not on our side, and it seems like everyone's trying to screw us over, we'll give the Russians Crimea, maybe Donetsk and Luhansk, and we're just going to go neutral. And that would be the worst end to the war, at this point, because we know that the Russians will never annex it. So the worst possible solution right now is that it goes status quo as it was before the war, and Donetsk and Luhansk still exists, or it becomes Russian annexed, and Russia also gets Crimea. Then no one's gotten anything out of it, and then Ukraine's also neutral. So I would say that was just a really dumb remark, and I usually try and keep it neutral, especially when talking about that kind of stuff. But it's never the place of the United States, especially in this kind of position internationally, to act like we can negotiate a peace on behalf of another country that isn't even directly attached to us in any kind of alliance or anything else. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. And also, let me see here. One second, I'm trying to go up because I saw something interesting here. Someone said something. See, Prince Blake said, not the Swiss, America. Oh yeah, some people have been saying the Swiss have not necessarily been neutral during this war. They have actually seized Russian assets. That is true, but still, at the end of the day, the Swiss are considered still worldwide, and if you ever look at Switzerland, they pretty much still are the most neutral country in the world. They don't really get involved in much of anything. They're not even involved in any kind of common European economic currency. They still have the Swiss franc. That's how neutral they are, and so I think that they still would be the best candidate for any kind of peace agreements and solutions worldwide, because you can almost be assured that if there was as least bias as possible to either side, the Swiss would have that. And so with that, I hope I addressed that fairly well. Of course, it's still everyone's opinion, whether anyone's the mediator, and at the end of the day, none of us make the deciding factor. It's just, in my opinion, I still think the Swiss would make the best one, because you always want to make sure that they look unbiased, because if they appear to be unbiased, the talks will go on longer, and they may achieve a lot more than if you bring in what will be considered a biased mediator that leans towards one side. So with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
You're right. And real quick, the final poll says, do you think that the power generating ship will be a great assistance to Ukraine? It looks like 76% said, of course, it will keep them warm. 10% said not sure. And 14% said no, it is going to become a target. Now, for me, I'm going to say not sure, because I think it's going to become a very tasty target for the Russians. But at the same time, it will certainly help warm their homes by providing power. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that the power generating ship, and the three of them, the fleet, will be incredibly beneficial to Ukraine. Will help the coastal cities to keep warm and to make sure that the citizens down there don't freeze, considering that their electrical units have also been knocked out as well. However, I don't think the Russians are ever going to allow those ships to make it to the southern coast of Ukraine. They'll probably try and stop them in the blockade and say that's not a part of the grain deal, and it's not. So we'll have to see how that develops, but if they do make it through, I think they're going to be a massive benefit. I don't think they'll be a target, considering they have a Turkish flag on them, and they're flying a Turkish flag. Well, I said flag twice. The Turkish colors, that protects them for the large part from any kind of real Russian attack. And so with that, I hope that addresses the poll fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. Well, first, let's get on to the 3 questions, and then we'll be getting right back into the news.
All right. And also, just a quick heads up, folks, I'm seeing that Nightbot is taking people out left and right. And please be aware that if you put a name of a politician in the live chat, it will time you out, and it progressively gets like a longer timeout. So the first one is like 10 seconds, and the next one's 180. Then it goes from there, and it gets worse. So please refrain from putting the politician's name in the chat. So that way Nightbot doesn't try to get you.
If you want to say something, though, you can say, we allow, I believe, neutral wordage. Because
yes.
Like the president, a senator, or a representative, because we don't really want it to be about American politics, so we want to avoid the wordage, because if we allow the words of, say, the current president or the former one, then people might start flinging around, like pretty much warring words in the chat and turn it into a battlefield down there. So with that, let's get on to the questions.
All right. So first up, we have a $50 donation from Lucy P, who is a channel legend, who says, great video today, Enforcer, with one of my favorite voiceovers, Mr. Sam Elliott. I haven't donated in quite a while, so please put this towards the Coffee and Donuts Fund and take a question from the chat.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support. Also, I thank you so much for enjoying that video I did today. I love doing that one. That one was really fun. It looks like the algorithm didn't pick it up at all, even compared to videos before. So that was kind of a little, it was kind of a bummer to me, but I still love that people who watched it really liked it. All the comments were incredibly positive. We may make more videos like that. I may end up putting those elsewhere. I might try and put them other places, or if they come back up, they'll be shorts instead, so that way they're actually in the proper category, because that was actually supposed to be a short. But with that, thank you so much once again for enjoying it, and thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running, helping us to stay alive behind the scenes, so that way we can keep doing this and also putting out fun videos like that. And so with that, we are on to the live chat question. Thank you so much once again.
Right, and the live chat question goes to Kim Henning, who says, why do they wrap cloth around mortar shells?
That cloth that you see wrapped around mortar shells near the tail is actually, I believe, called a cheese rag. If I remember correctly, mortar shell. And the cheese rag is pretty much just some additional charges. It allows for the mortar to travel a longer distance, because each of those little, I believe they are cheese rags? I think I might be wrong with the wordage on that. Correct me if I am wrong. But they just allow for the mortar to travel a further range, because these things actually explode once the primer goes off at the bottom of the mortar. So it's really neat, actually. I never knew that. I think I asked someone in my reenacting group what the hell those things were, and they told me, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. But with that, I hope that answers your question fairly well. Hopefully it was correct. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Right, and up next, we have a $35 super chat from Praise Adonai, who is, of course, another channel legend, who says, Enforcer and Matt, have you seen the generator ships Turkey sent to Ukraine? And yes, we did. Are there any other sources of power to bring nuclear back online? Power for Ukraine, question mark. What about bringing nuclear back online soon? Yeehaw! And Slav Ukraine.
Yeehaw! And thank you so much for the support. And I was correct. They are cheese. It's a cheesecloth. It's not a cheese rag. It's a cheesecloth. But those were correct on the mortar. Anyways, moving on to this one. I don't think there will be a way to bring on the ZMPP back to the grid. Now I'm sounding like some kind of a Department of Energy spokesperson. There will be no way to bring the uranium-235 back up to critical mass. And all that. Anyways, let me just say it like a layman instead of saying it like in some nerdy ZMPP thing. There is no way to connect the Zaporizhzhia power plant directly, because the Russians still have complete control over the plant. So sadly, they cannot bring nuclear power back on from that plant. However, there is a nuclear plant up in the area of, if I remember correctly, somewhere up here. I think it's near Voznesensk or Oleksandrivka. That is actually quite sizable, and I believe it does provide a sizable amount of power to the southern area of Ukraine. I believe that one never stopped working. That one's been working continuously throughout the war. So in that regard, nuclear power is still there and still can be used. But in other areas, I guess you could say now down near the coast where the power may not be reaching, there's really no way to bring nuclear power back on in that area. They'll entirely be relying on different sources of power, whether it be small electric generators that they bring in or large power generating ships that moor off the coast, well, right in port. Those are really the only ways that we can see them getting power, but nuclear, if it's coming from the Zaporizhzhia power plant, is probably highly unlikely. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support and also helping out our channel. You are a channel legend, and you've been around forever. And I thank you so much once again for the support. And I hope we did answer that question fairly well based off of what the knowledge and information we have to work off of. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the segment, and then we'll be moving on into the next bit of Location Unknown news, which actually starts off with a pretty funny meme.
All right, and moving on to our last one, we have a $20 super chat from Panama Floyd, who is another channel legend. Shut up and take my money, and leave Bayraktar on the intro until people who were born in Sevastopol can dip their toes in the sea on the Crimean beaches again.
And thank you so much for the support. And also, I don't know why, Matthew, but for me, it always feels very dirty when people say "shut up and take my money," because it's like I like it. I love it.
I
think it's funny, but at the same time, the channel, like, I don't run the channel for the money. Like, the money helps us to keep this thing running in the background. It helps us to stay alive, so it's important in that regard. But, you know, I'm not, like, running this thing, like, give us money, you know, like, I feel like that's a really bad way to run these, and I never even started it for that reason. So it kind of feels weird, but we will take it. And I thank you so much for the support, because it does help us to keep this thing running. And also, could you reread that, Matthew?
All right. So the question was, and leave Bayraktar on the intro until people who were born in Sevastopol can dip their toes in the sea on the Crimean beaches again.
And that I would agree with. I'd certainly think that it should be played pretty much until the end of the war. I think Bayraktar is a classic. It's definitely, also I know that it's a Futurama quote, some people are saying that, but still at the same time, it's like, you know, like the actual, like, thing behind it, you know what I mean? But anyways, also, Deepest Tim has just brought up the established title scam. Oh boy, that's oh man.
The scam that so many large YouTubers fell for, like, head over heels.
Oh man, it's so many of them. A lot of good YouTubers too, sadly, had that sponsor, so now they're kind of getting heat. But maybe we'll go into that at the end of the stream in the question segment where we're not covering the news, but we'll have to save that for now. Anyways, I do think that we'll keep this on until the very end of the war, especially the Bayraktar song, because it's just a classic. It's been here since the beginning. So with that, thank you so much once again for the support. We will make sure to keep playing Bayraktar, and with that, we are now going to be moving on into the location unknowns, here just a little bit west of Kharkiv, starting off with some Ukrainians playing a song that some of y'all may know from memes. This song is a Turkish song called Patay Melia Dream, I believe, and if you've ever seen some memes, this will have played in a few of them. So with that, here's the video. I'm not going to play a lot of it because I think it's copyrighted, but I'll let y'all hear a little bit of it.
Is that a Mazda?
I think so. And also, this guy is driving pretty quickly down this bumpy road. Like, they're almost getting thrown out of the car. And also, you see him flinging it around a little bit. They're having a good time.
Oh, it's a manual too. Legend. Oh, are we lagging?
No, we're not lagging. I'm just sitting here watching the video a little bit. Also, is that PsyOps? Is that PsyOps on the rearview mirror? Look at that. That is PsyOps. That right there.
Oh my gosh.
It's the PsyOps face. PsyOps, you're famous. And they're just rocking out to this meme song. Also passing by people at that bus stop at like 80 miles an hour. But with that, that's the end of the video. And it is nice and also fun to see that the Ukrainians are still having fun out there on the front lines. They deal with the horrors and horrendous things that we can't even comprehend. And while I see a lot of videos of the horrendous things and pictures of the horrendous things that happen out there, it's still a totally different story to be out there. And they're still joking around, having a good time, and the morale is still better than ever before. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a rocket hitting a Ukrainian trench in slow motion. It hit almost right by the cameraman. It appears that the cameraman got out of it unscathed or with minor injuries, and it was insane to see. So here's the video.
Fire!
Also, we got to mute that because that's a song. And we're looking into the sky. You know, the camera's just doing what it does. And right there, that is actually a grad rocket that blows up right in the trench, right by the cameraman. And he falls to the floor, but he starts crawling away immediately. And that's the end of the video, but let's watch that again, because that's got to be the closest anyone's ever been to a grad. Also, I got to give a huge credit to this cameraman, being right in the line of fire of a grad rocket, pretty much, and somehow he still kept the camera with this thing probably traveling almost at supersonic speed on the rocket. Like, I don't even understand, like, how he was able to focus on that at the same time. Like, look at that, man. He actually panned the camera.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was crazy. Really nuts. I mean, I don't even know how he did that. That thing was flying at such a fast speed, they had to slow it down to like super slow motion to get it. But with that, that's the end of the video. And once again, you can see the kind of rigors that Ukrainian soldiers deal with on the front lines, but they stick to their trenches, they stick to their lines, and they hold the Russians back each and every day. And it's massive loads of respect that they deserve for going through this kind of stuff and still winning the war. Well, that we're now moving on to the next clip where we can see that the Ukrainian soldiers are bathing a puppy. Here's the video.
Наш
Look at that little puppy. Oh, look at that's a cute puppy. You gotta mute the music because I know that one's copyrighted. I can see him washing the little puppy's paws, putting some water on his belly. Little puppy is getting treated like a prince. It's always nice to see little videos of puppies and animals that the Ukrainians are taking care of on the front lines, because it's good to know that they are being taken care of and they're not just in the middle of some wrecked town with hardly any food going feral. And look at that guy right there. He cradled that thing like a baby for a few seconds. Look at that. It's a boy. And then he starts drying off the face very carefully. But with that, that's the end of the video. And I love to know that the Ukrainians are taking care of all the animals that they ever find. I mean, they find all kinds of animals out there at this point, whether it be a dog or a hamster, which we're about to watch in a second. But they take care of them all. And I've got a lot of respect for soldiers that go through such horrendous things each and every day, yet they still find the compassion and the care to be able to take care of these sweet little vulnerable and helpless dogs and puppies that are just out there in the middle of nowhere without anyone to help them out. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next clip of Location Unknown News, where we can see a critically endangered European hamster crawling around the wheels of a Ukrainian supply truck. And it's a real, Matthew, this is crazy. It's a real wild hamster. Also, I like that right there, Matthew. It looks like he's got a big bulletproof vest on.
Yeah, seriously.
О, боец.
It's hitting the Michael Jackson right there. Dun, 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 Billie Jean, not my love. And now it's still running off a little bit. It'll turn around and hit the Michael Jackson again. Oh, wait a minute. It hopped and it squeaked. What the? I didn't even know they could do that.
Is it? They're about to piss that thing off in a minute. It's, oh!
That was a perfect frame to boss it at. Oh my God! He got him!
Is that vicious? I would have never thought. That thing straight up attacked like a honey badger, man.
Oh my God! Look at that thing, dude! Literally, it was an assault, like an air assault soldier or something. It just flew at him. Oh my gosh, that's just crazy to watch. And it backed off immediately. It's good to know that the Ukrainians are taking this a good stride. And of course, the thing's scared as hell. I feel sorry for it a little bit, but at the same time, what a neat sighting. These things are critically endangered, by the way, the European hamster. So it's very rare to see them, and they got to see one. While they've still scared the hell of it, though, but they saw one. Still, I gotta say this though. I gotta watch it one more time. That little thing is ferocious, and honestly, I don't know about you, Matthew, but I believe this deserves to be one of the symbols, one of the minor symbols of the Lee Spring Army is this here European hamster.
Really?
I love that. That's just so funny. Let me see if I can catch it mid-flight.
That thing honestly looks pretty akin to the rats, like, really.
It kind of does, but still, it's really cool. Like, look at that thing. That thing, honestly, that little frame right there, it looks like it's prowling around outside of a house, like tiptoeing, it's about to rob the house. Like, it looks like that. It's cool to see him. And also, that's just hilarious. And it made a noise and everything. Oh man. Anyways, with that was a rare European hamster, one of the few. And it's just neat to see that they found one. But still, I feel sorry for it because it was scared as hell. Anyways, with that, we're now going to be moving on to the Russian casualty report of the day, going from a funny video of a hamster attacking a guy to now we're going to be taking a look at how many Russians have been wiped out today. Kind of a little bit of a 180, but let's take a look. So, in good news today, 12 supply vehicles were knocked out, and that is a considerable number. It's now getting up into the range of 4,500 nearly. We've also seen that another 560 soldiers have been killed, so somehow the Russians are mitigating their losses at this point in the war. It doesn't look like they're taking on the first battle of Bakhmut casualties of around 700 to 1,000 a day, but they are taking on 560, which is still a pretty high number. We can also see that 5 armored personnel carriers were knocked out, and only 1 tank, which is incredibly odd. This is one of the lowest days in terms of tank casualties we've ever seen, and I'm wondering if it's because they're starting to hold their older T-62Ms in reserve, because once they run out of T-62Ms, there's not going to be any armored forces left for them to work off of. That may be the case, but we can also see that 2 artillery systems were knocked out today, and no other vehicles of any importance were knocked out, no drones or MLRSs or anything similar. So it was all more so, I guess you could say, units in the ground forces that are directly involved in very close-up frontline fighting. It looks like the Russians are going to be slowed down just by the 560 killed, and if we go to minusrus.com, right here, we gotta wait for it to redirect. But we go to minusrus, it says that they lost another 2,240 today. Once again, I have to keep this in mind and have to let y'all know this. I really have no idea how minusrus is calculating the wounded per day. I don't know if they're going off of the rule of 3 or the rule of 2. It's definitely not the rule of 2. It's something like the rule of 3 or even higher. For every 1 killed, there's about 3 wounded. So going off of that, it seems to be a rough approximate, but we can once again get the idea going off of this that almost another 3 BTGs of the Russian armed forces have been depleted again today in terms of overall casualties, and another 560 have been straight up killed and become fatalities. So going off of that, it still looks like the Russians are bleeding a massive amount of manpower per day, and we probably will see that it's true, that the prediction we made about, I think, a week and a half ago, that in about 20 days or so, the Russians will have to decide whether they call up another partial mobilization or a total mobilization, or if they start to wind the war down and wind down their activities in the war to try and mitigate the casualties. One or the other, we'll just have to wait and see, but it is still an interesting look at how badly the Russian forces are still doing and what kind of casualties they're taking. Although the actual material casualties, such as armored personnel carriers and tanks, are low. Abnormally low. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the last bit of location unknown news, where we can see a Ukrainian soldier inadvertently embracing the suck in an attempt to avoid the suck. You see, there's a thing in the military that many veterans have told me about. It's this thing called embracing the suck, which means that you just have to accept that things will suck. It will not be enjoyable, it will be terrible. And we can see that the soldier here, in his hubris, has attempted to avoid the suck by walking on the pretty much ice swimming pool that's been made in the middle of this road, and not through the muddy treads that are on both sides. We will see that he pays for his hubris as the as Mars himself has cast upon him the misfortune of the ice collapsing beneath his feet, as you'll see right here. Cringe. so now it's not mud, it's literal straight up water under that ice that his feet have gone into. And now it's just going in every single footstep. So now the entire thing he sought to avoid, he's now become. He's now gotten his feet wet. And so with that, we're now going to be moving in to, well, actually moving out of the location unknowns from that little funny bit at the end, and we're now going to be moving into the northeast, which has been incredibly quiet. But we do have some news behind the front lines to cover first. For example, in Kharkiv, we actually saw that they are loading all the rockets into a single landfill in Kharkiv, and we can see the sheer volume of artillery fire that was directed at Kharkiv during the battles that occurred months ago. And so here's the video, of course, provided by Radio Free Europe. And all of those casings you see on the ground are rockets of different sizes.
Доказовою базою, оскільки вона саме фіксує застосування Росією того озброєння, яке знаходиться в неї на балансі, яке вона використовує проти України. З цими доказами працюють міжнародні експерти, працівники Міжнародного кримінального суду. Всього за фактом обстрілів на території міста Харкова та області було
The guy is literally standing in a landfill of waste of these Russian rockets that landed on this town. Supposedly, according to the caption on this video, there are 5,000 in this landfill alone. And imagine that, like 5,000 rockets that are just in one landfill, and this is only one of them. There's several of these around the city, of all of the grad rockets that they're picking up that either didn't detonate or they did, and they're putting them into landfills. And that's how much fire the Russians levied against civilians in Kharkiv for months on end. They did not care how many civilians they killed. All they cared about was how much fire were they laying down and how much of that city was going to be obliterated by the next day.
В ЄРДР більше 5000 кримінальних проваджень за статтею 438 Кримінального кодексу України. Це порушення законів та звичаїв війни. Тут на цій ділянці знаходяться лише залишки боєприпасів, якими обстрілювали місто Харків. Зокрема, обстрілюються лікарні, висотні будівлі, багатоквартирні будинки, приватні сектори, також підприємства цивільні, які не мають жодного відношення до військової інфраструктури.
So with that, that's the end of the video, and we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of news out of Kharkiv and moving on down towards Izium, where we've actually seen a couple of interesting things. Also, in case of y'all did not know, I believe if I'm telling the story correctly, in Izium, we were not able to cover this the other day. Actually, it was one of our off days, and there was so much frontline news to cover. This one got buried, although it was planned to be covered. A children's book author in Ukraine ended up being dug up from one of the mass graves outside of town. If y'all remember, there was about 400 unidentified markers that were found in the woods near Izium, and under grave 31 was the author of children's book of some children's books. The guy had done nothing. He had committed no crimes. He had done nothing before the war that would have made the Russians target the guy and single him out. All he did was write children's books. You know, like in the United States, you'll probably know The Little Hungry Caterpillar or something similar. He was pretty much on that level of writing children's books, and because of him just writing children's books, the Russians singled that guy out and killed him and threw him under an unmarked grave. The only reason that they knew that that guy was buried out there and knew to try and identify him under grave 31 was that the funeral parlor in Izium had actually marked down at some point that he had been killed, and that he, as far as they could tell, he was buried under grave marker 31. And so with that, we're now going to be moving from that story and on into the video clip of some Ukrainian soldiers spending their free time pulling off some incredibly nice deeds for the Ukrainian citizens who are living in the wrecked city of Izium without really any kind of, I guess you could say, modern amenities. And so here's the video.
Это у вас что, обед?
Нет, мы воду греем голову помыть. Ну мы тут готовим, вот это готовим.
То есть это у вас как кухня?
Да.
Может, вам еще шампуня? У нас есть
Давайте.
или гель, или шампунь.
Давай.
Я сейчас вам принесу.
Хорошо.
У вас такой женский коллектив,
Да.
поэтому это вам.
Ой, сладости.
Да.
Можно вас попросить?
Говорите.
Вы будете сюда еще приезжать?
Возможно.
She's getting straight to the point. She's like, hey, can I ask you a favor? Can you come by and do this again?
Дайте мне хороший фонарик. Спасибо. Огромное.
And she got it. She got the flashlight. She said, hey, could you come back by again and give me a flashlight? We really need one. And the guy got her a flashlight, too.
Все, пожалуйста.
And she looks like she's pretty ecstatic for it. And with that, that's the end of the video. And it's so nice to see that the Ukrainian soldiers behind the lines are being as good as they are on the front, and they're making sure to help out people who need it. And this is what Ukraine is all about, sticking it through with each other and making sure that they take care of one another. And it's good to see that a lot of Ukrainians do this. And this soldier is definitely the epitome of it. He's risked his life for months on end, each and every day, possibly getting killed, possibly never seeing his family again. And then at the end of all of the sacrifice that he's given in service of his nation, he's still willing to sacrifice his free time, the very little he probably has while he's behind the lines, to help out fellow citizens and make sure that they can get through the war A-OK. And for that, I gotta say, incredibly impressive and good for him. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of news in Izium, where we can see this is a very sad story actually, so I'm going to brace y'all for it. A school was destroyed. Actually, I'm sorry, a building was destroyed in Izium, and a friend of someone who was in that building, supposedly when it was destroyed, has been digging up the rubble for months at this point, even during the Russian occupation and afterwards, trying to see if their friend is buried in the rubble somewhere. And so, with that in mind, if you are not really a big fan of sad stories, this is about to be one. Of course, credit to Radio Free Europe for providing us with these stories, although difficult to listen to and difficult to bear and understand because they're just so sad and pitiful. It gives an idea of why the Ukrainians continue to fight on and why they will not give up to the Russians, is because they end up surviving and living through atrocities like these. And so with that, here's the video.
Почему я туда этим начал заниматься? В первую очередь там была моя одноклассница, это подруга, и вся ее семья с детьми.
С этой сферой я вообще никак не был связан, занимался аксессуарами для мобильных телефонов. И никогда в жизни не мог подумать, что я буду заниматься таким делом.
Обвалились все 5 этажей, и все люди, которые находились, думали, что они в безопасности, находясь в бомбоубежище. Под такой массой кирпича и плит их просто придавило. Это наш классный альбом наших выпускников с первой школы. Я его нашел на завалах, когда доставал свою одноклассницу. Вот мы вместе с Леной на фоне разбитого, ну, тогда он еще был целый дом. На данный момент то, что вот от него осталось, собственно, наверное, на этом все. И этот альбом остался просто нам на память. Я ложил ее в мешок, я ее и хоронил, и ставил крест я ей. И таблички вешал тоже на ее крест я. И на могилы ее детей тоже.
Это мирные граждане, дети, взрослые, старики, которые были похоронены просто во дворах, возле детских садов, которые были хаотично похоронены вдоль дорог, по центральным улицам, чтобы дети наши, вообще дети города Изюма не видели просто захоронений, крестов, потому что это как бы немного странно, когда дети смотрят и спрашивают: папа, мама, а что это такое? Когда возле детского сада похоронены люди. Бывало, люди морально просто не выдерживали такой нагрузки, и мы находили просто повешенных людей. Было такое, что там соседи говорят, что пожилая пара зашла в квартиру и долгое время уже не выходила. Мы заходим в квартиру, они в обнимку так лежат, так и умерли вдвоем. Ну, там, да, им по 80 лет, но они, я думаю, чтобы еще пожили бы спокойно себе при мирных обстоятельствах. Люди погибали и от холода, и от голода. В основном это были люди-инвалиды, которые просто не могли выбраться там, с 4-5 этажей. Да, когда все разъехались, в доме никого не оставалось. Люди там выпадали с кресел, пробовали как-то выползти, у них не получалось достать до замков, они так и умирали. Поступила задача забрать из морга 17 воинов ВСУ. И мы привезли их сюда, сгрузили их здесь и потом вручную сложили здесь в яму. И у меня оставался крест деревянный, я хоронил своих друзей, ну, и я вот поставил вот этот вот крест воинам ВСУ. Точно знаю, что у них были постреляны головы.
With that, that's the end of the video, of course, provided by Radio Free Europe, and it's incredibly sickening to hear the terrible stories of what happened in Izium, and to think that you know, at the beginning of the story, it said that the Russians didn't even allow the Ukrainians to try and dig up the dead who had been killed in the bomb shelter by the Russians, for really no other reason than they didn't want them to. And for these reasons and these kinds of atrocities, which occur across the entirety of Ukraine, they're occurring in cities like Bakhmut right now, the Russians should pay. And that is the reason why there should be no chance of peace agreements unless if the Ukrainians have retaken almost everything, or if the Russians are on their knees. Those are the only ways that the peace agreement should go through. With that, we're now going to be moving from some...
You know, the really sad thing is the fellow that's walking around talking to the reporters. You can tell by looking at his eyes that he is beyond affected. Like, he has seen too much.
He has, and it's sad to think about. Also, it appeared that the woman that he dug up out of that bomb shelter was actually his high school sweetheart, or something similar, and I'm sure that had a massive toll on him to see that her and her whole family had been killed inside of that bomb shelter by a Russian artillery shell or a missile that caved the entire apartment down on top of them. It's sickening to think, especially on just a small glimpse like that. We only got a small taste of what is happening to thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people across all of Ukraine right there, with people just getting killed left and right, people they knew, people they loved, people that have been a part of their world, and they just come to a stop one day because the Russian army came through and killed them. And so with that, we're going to be moving on now from that little bit of unfortunate news, well, very unfortunate news, I'm trying to understate it, but with that, we're now going to be moving on into the area of Oleksandrivka in the northeastern area, where we can see that Russians are living in terrible conditions. They're pretty much living out of their BTR. This guy's also smoking a vape, and they're listening to absolutely garbage music. So with that, here's the video. It's crazy to me how no matter where the Russian army is, even if they aren't on the front lines, for some reason their uniforms are so unkempt, and also their cleanliness is so poor that they always look homeless. Like, it looks like an army of vagrants, nearly, that are operating the Russian army.
Я Ставропольский. Не наговаривай. Так точно.
Look at this guy. How in the world do you have dirt on your face? You know, like, I know that these guys have probably been moving around, but most of them have probably been riding inside of the armored personnel carrier, and yet they're still filthy. I don't get it. Like, I don't get this a bit. Well, that's the end of the video, but there's a little bit of a glimpse of Russian life in between committing war crimes and trying to take over more Ukrainian land, which they are failing at terribly. They sit around and listen to garbage music, dressed in rags, in an old, outdated BTR, and they drink vodka. That's it. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip, and we're now going to be moving further down the front lines, where we can see that the Ukrainian soldiers are holding the line. They've now set up defensive lines in this area near Svatove, and it looks like they may be waiting out the winter, which is what has given us the suggestion that we may see no activity in any of the snowy areas because both militaries are setting up winter camp. And while we know that the Ukrainian supply lines are better off than the Russians, it appears that they're not wanting to risk anything in the winter because things could go unpredictably because of the weather. But we can see right here a Ukrainian soldier outside of his dugout. Really nice dugout. It's got a wooden roof on it and also some dirt, and he's drinking a cup of joe. We can see in the next picture here a whole bunch of Ukrainian soldiers, one of them with an AKM, the other ones with AKs of different kinds, probably some AK-74s. We can also see in the next picture a Ukrainian soldier looking out the front of the dugout, or the bunker, with his AK-74. And then in the next picture, we can see one coming down. They also made some really nice stairs into this thing. Quality craftsmanship, an attribute of the Ukrainian armed forces that has never gone away. And then the last picture, we can see a Ukrainian soldier riding in a car, most likely away from the bunker. Or to it, we don't really know. But with that, that's the end of the end of this video, and it's good to see that the 249th Battalion and the 127th Brigade are holding the lines in the Svatove area and are ready to counter any Russian push if one was to happen. I'm sure the Russians are probably doing the exact same. With that, There's not any news to cover from the northeastern area beyond that. It is a stagnant area. And so with that, we're now going to be moving down into Donetsk, and actually in the area of Zaitsevo, where we saw the difference on picture of different sizes of mortars. That was actually removed, so we will not be seeing the different sizes of mortars, unfortunately. We'll have to move a little bit further down the lines and into the area of Troitsky, where we saw the 53rd Brigade, the 53rd Mechanized Brigade, getting into some close combat in the Donetsk region. We're assuming that while this is a new video, it may be slightly old. Also, let me mute that. It may be slightly old because there are still leaves on the trees, and we know that that's one thing that's absent out of all Ukraine right now, is leaves, or any kind of foliage for that matter. You see him looking into the distance and firing off his rifle. And we now see him walking back, quite calmly actually, considering that it's a little bit of a firefight. We see another soldier firing what appeared to be a scar into the distance in the other direction. I couldn't really tell you what that rifle was, honestly. It's a little bit too grainy for me to honestly give a real answer, but with that, that's the end of the video, and it is nice to see that the Ukrainians, at that time in the war, a couple of months ago, were still fighting incredibly well in that area. And so with that, we're now going to be moving a little bit further down the front lines and into the area of Donetsk city itself, where we saw a very rare sighting of Ukrainian artillery landing in the town. We assume that it was being fired at some kind of target and a pinpoint in the center of the city, but we can't really say what target it was or if it was successful, but we can see the artillery landing down there, and so here's the video. We see some stuff exploding in the city, and it was a very short clip. We couldn't even tell what it was hitting, but hopefully it did hit on the mark and knock out a couple of Russian military vehicles or Russian military equipment. With that, we are now moving on out of Donetsk city, and we're moving towards the area of Marinka, where we also saw Ukrainian forces in this area firing at the Russians from defensive positions. Also, there's no music on this, although it's only 18 seconds long.
Димон работает по точке. Димон работает
see him going into the dugout. We see the Ukrainian firing off the CKP. And the guy behind him filming is really getting into it. With that, that's the end of the video. Hopefully they were able to hit the Russians in the distance or suppress them, but there's a little bit of an idea of what's going on the front lines in that area, and the Ukrainians are making sure to keep the Russians at bay with some light taps of machine gun fire. With that, we're now going to be moving behind the lines, where we also saw that a Russian supply depot was destroyed. We rarely get videos of Russian supply depots getting destroyed at this point in the war, but we were treated with one today. And so, here's the video. We can also hear the Blue Frog music playing as this drone is on its way down into the supply depot. It's traveling, it's traveling. We see some vehicles on fire down there. We see some exploding. Some sparks and some flares flying all around. You now see them looking again, and it looks like this little ammunition depot or supply depot has had a pretty rough day. A very rough day, for that matter. And that's a pretty sizable explosion. I think a lot of supplies were lost right there. And also you see Snap. Apparently this drone is trying to give us its Snapchat, but I'm not really a big fan of Snapchat. See right there at the end of the video, the vehicle continuing to burn, and with that, that is the end of the clip, but it's nice to see that the Ukrainians were able to knock out some Russian supplies behind the lines again. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Donetsk area in general. Once again, a stalemate, not much to report from here, and we're now moving down into Volodar while I sit there and psych everyone out with a quick zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out trick, where we can see that the 71st Brigade was in action.
Видимости было не видно, понимаете? И вот это...
Давай запишем. Ну,
так, команда, да? Я тут и так-то всю армию уже прославился.
Ви туди не йдіть аж далеко.
You see them firing a mortar.
Лимон!
Oh dear. That fellow really didn't duck down very much.
Але от саме на цій ділянці, кажуть, українські військові
наступ ворога вдалося зупинити, і тепер тут навіть українські військові проводять певні наступальні.
And with that's the end of the video. Pretty nice.
Look at that mad hog.
Yeah, that is an angry hog right there. I guess you could say that that's a boar's head. You can find that in your local grocery store, by the way. They sell cheese and meat. It's actually kind of good. Anyways, with that, that's the end of that video. But once again, nice to see that the 71st Brigade is out there in action. With that, not really a lot to report from this area. It appears that the battles around Volodar and Pavlivka have come to a stop, and the Ukrainians have been able to stop the Russian push down here, although it didn't really achieve anything. It just allowed the Russians to rack up a pretty high amount of casualties, like they did in the Bakhmut area, and not really get anything out of it. And so with that, it's now time for us to move down into the Kherson area, near Novikakhovka, where we saw a HIMARS firing its missiles onto the other side of the riverbanks. And this actually happened today. We're actually seeing that action is picking up in the Kherson area. It appears that the Ukrainians are beginning to fire across the river again. And also you can hear the music for some kind of ad. I think it's a Game of Thrones ad on YouTube. We now see the missiles on its way. And we can hear that la 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 as the missile flies away. I wonder if Russians hear that faintly in the distance as the missile is closing in on them. Like you're at a supply depot and you hear la 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 as the missile's like almost there.
Hi, Mars.
No, that's what it says when it explodes. You just hear right before it explodes, "Hi, Mars," and then you just get a white ladder. And you see it continuing to fire off pretty much all 6 of its missiles. I'm sure we'll see that by the end of the video. And with that, that's the end of the video. And it's nice to see that the HIMARS are still in operation and being used, hopefully, effectively. Well, that we're now going to be moving... We're now going to be moving on to the southern bank of the Dnieper River, where you can see the Ukrainians conducting a bombing run with one of their drones. An actual carpet bombing. And there they go. They're on their way. Do they hit their target? I don't know. Let's watch the video. And then bada bing, bada boom, and they hit the target. That was actually really accurate, considering the thing's flying like a plane. And with that, that's the end of the video. And I got to give credit to the Ukrainian drone pilots. They're starting to drop the bombs now with precision, like it's an airplane as well. It's not just stationary above the target. They're actually flying towards the target. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the next clip of Kherson news in Kherson City itself, where we saw some Russians getting pinned down. Now, this is some old footage. This was footage from when the Russians were actually on the northern bank of the Dnieper River around... At this point, I think it was 3 weeks ago. So here it is. This is new footage, by the way. We haven't ever seen it before. It came out today, but we do know it's old because it was in Kherson, and they haven't been there for 3 weeks. We can hear the rifle fire bouncing off the ground all around them. Here's some explosions.
Нас гранатами начали закидывать, блядь.
You hear shell flying overhead.
Нормально все.
Boy, this guy's breathing. He's getting a little bit freaked out. And if I noticed this correctly, Matthew, tell me, did you see this in any training manuals? He must have gone to that that security training school in Detroit, Michigan. You know the one I'm talking about, Matthew, where like they tell you all the pseudo stuff. Because this guy has assumed the tactically accurate position, the tactical position of the leapfrog. Like, look at his feet, dude. They're like frogs on the rear end. It's like he's ready to leap forward out of that hole and like 30 feet into the air.
Seriously.
I mean, that man is about to jump. You feel froggy, man? Ooh, an artillery round just exploded almost right on top of him. Leapfrog is still in the same spot.
Еще один 300, блядь.
Блядь. Watch us get censored for that on YouTube for saying that. They pick up foreign curse words. We hear the rounds still popping off the ground right in front of him. When you see this guy fiddling with the ammo belt again because he's getting a little nervous. When you see Leapfrog's been joined by another guy. This guy's now setting up his bipod. Ooh, oh my lord!
Oh.
Leapfrog almost got it. Leapfrog almost jumped. Good lord! Whoever was back
that was
there
like
just got
straight out of that movie. That was like one shot. What was it? 19 something.
1917. Yeah, it was just
looks
like,
just like it.
Man, someone back there just got a white Lotta. That was their family popping the champagne cork back there for getting a free white Lotta. Remember, it's okay. They have other sons and daughters that they're fine with. One of them is totally fine to lose.
Я тоже, блядь, со спиной я не тащу.
You now see this guy fiddling with the ammo belt on his PKM again. He's now reloading the gun. And you see that they're not really doing a lot of fighting. They're just kind of doing a lot of sitting and praying. Ooh, that was close. Good lord, that thing like bounced right off his head. And again, another mortar round landed back there behind them on the trench. Whew. Man, that mortar fire is accurate as hell. It's like landing right on top of them.
It might be about time to leave that position.
Well, if they stand up, though, they'll come under rifle fire, and then they're screwed that way, too.
They better start crawling.
They better just put up their hands and surrender, honestly. I think that would be their best option right now. But you know, that's not the Russian way. These heroic patriots of the heroic motherland will continue to fight.
Они подходят на 12, к нам на 12 подходят, давай.
When you see another mortar round landing further down the trench again, you see him messing with the ammo belt again. Well, with that, that's the end of the video.
This is terrible. This is not going to end good.
It probably didn't end good, but the video cut out before we could even see. But that gave you a pretty good idea of what the Russians were facing in those final days on the northern bank as they were getting close further and further in towards Kherson, and were also trying to pull out their forces as fast as they could. With that, we're now going to be moving into Kharkiv, where we can see a Ukrainian doing his patriotic duty of burning all of the Russian flags. Gotta mute that, but you can see that, sadly, they're not using them as toilet paper anymore. They got a surplus of toilet paper, and so now they're using these as firewood. Or fire paper, I guess. Kindling would probably be a better description. That plastic bag also just caught on fire, and then it just flew away in the wind, so I don't know where it went, but hopefully it's not starting a wildfire or anything. Now see him burning this flag as well. And also the plastic. That one also flew off. It's like, uh-oh. I just think he's having a pretty good time with it, actually. And with that, that's the end of the video. But it's nice to see that they're making sure to take care of the Russian flags and treat them the way they should be. With that, we've now covered all of the news in this area except for one. And once again, I hate to do it, and I know that everyone likes good news, but war isn't always good news. And while I'm always a very positive person on this channel and like to paint the war in a good light and keep high spirits, there is always unfortunate things to happen in the war. War is nothing but a series of unfortunate events. And in the area of Pravdine, we saw that the Russians had killed 6 more civilians. They had been buried with their hands still tied behind their back. And in this picture, they're exhuming them from the grave under this rubble and pulling them out so that way they can be identified later or given a proper burial. Once again, the Russians committing war crimes, even in smaller villages in the Kherson area, shows that everywhere should be inspected, and every civilian or citizen that is in the occupied areas should, well, the liberated areas, should be questioned to see if they know the whereabouts or location or any, I guess you could say, atrocities that were committed by the Russian forces while they were in these villages. And so with that, that's the end of all of the news from around Ukraine and around the world as well. And it's time for us to move to Kyiv to listen to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on a brand new day and a brand new week of the war on day 282. And so without further ado, here's the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Вільні народи незламної країни. Щороку, 1 грудня, ми згадуємо подію, яка визначила історію. Подію, яка сказала дуже багато про усіх нас, про українців, про те, хто ми є, і про те, ким ми ніколи не будемо. 1 грудня 31 рік тому відбувся референдум, який об'єднав всю територію нашої держави. Ніхто з наших людей не залишився за межами всеукраїнського рішення. Київ і Севастополь, Одеса і Крим, Львів і Черкаси, Чернігів і Харків, Донецьк і Херсон, Запоріжжя і Луганськ, Хмельниччина і Кіровоградщина, Волинь і Дніпропетровщина, Суми і Закарпаття, Франківськ і Тернопіль, Житомирщина і Чернівці, Вінниця, Київщина, Миколаїв, Полтава, Рівне. Всі підтримали. Люди підтвердили акт проголошення незалежності України. Вільно і законно. Це був справжній референдум, а не якась імітація. Це був чесний референдум. І саме тому його визнав світ. І було важливо, що не просто політики, а саме люди поставили крапку в історії імперії, яка будувалась на запереченні волі людей, яка вбивала, намагаючись увічнити заперечення волі людей, але яку люди все одно повалили. І якраз своєю волею. З того дня, 1991 року, українці пережили багато намагань перетворити крапку на трикрапку чи на крапку з комою. Ми бачили багато діячів, які не могли заспокоїтись, що імперію таки повалили. Ми і тепер боронимо Україну від таких товаришів, які хотіли цьогоріч відзначати 100-річчя імперії замість чергової річниці волі. Вони хотіли, але буде за українськими правилами. Наше прагнення жити вільно, яке було висловлено 24 серпня і підтверджено 1 грудня, не зламати. Українці більше ніколи не будуть камінчиками якихось там імперій. Ми вже вибороли це і забезпечимо для нашої держави всю повноту незалежності. Забезпечимо, зокрема, духовну незалежність. Ми ніколи і нікому не дозволимо будувати імперію всередині української душі. Сьогодні відбулось засідання РНБО. Засідання, на якому ми розглянули численні факти зв'язків окремих релігійних кіл в Україні з державою-агресором. На жаль, навіть російський терор і повномасштабна війна не переконали деяких діячів в тому, що варто подолати спокусу зла. Що ж, маємо створити такі умови, коли будь-які залежні від держави-агресора діячі не матимуть жодної можливості маніпулювати українцями і послаблювати Україну зсередини. Отже, перше, РНБО доручила уряду внести на розгляд Верховної Ради законопроект щодо унеможливлення діяльності в Україні афільованих із центрами впливу в Російській Федерації релігійних організацій. Друге, Державній службі з етнополітики та свободи совісті забезпечити проведення релігієзнавчої експертизи статуту про управління УПЦ на наявність церковно-канонічного зв'язку з Московським патріархатом за необхідності вжити передбаченим законом заходів. Третє. Забезпечити перевірку наявності правових підстав та дотримання умов користування релігійними організаціями майном, яке перебуває на території Національного Києво-Печерського історико-культурного заповідника. Четверте. Всім органам, до компетенції яких відносяться питання у сфері забезпечення національної безпеки, активізувати заходи з виявлення та протидії підривній діяльності російських спецслужб у релігійному середовищі України і застосувати персональні санкції. Прізвища будуть оприлюднені невдовзі. І п'яте. Потребуємо підвищення статусу і посилення можливостей Державної служби з етнополітики та свободи совісті. Відбудеться реформа цієї структури, яка дозволить їй реально захищати права та законні інтереси українців і держави. Цими та іншими рішеннями ми гарантуємо Україні духовну незалежність. Хочу підкреслити, в 1991 році наша держава стала саме на законний і демократичний шлях. Цим шляхом ми і будемо йти далі. Тільки правові кроки, виважені рішення і національні інтереси. Сьогодні ж продовжили працювати над реалізацією української формули миру, яку я презентував на саміті G19, зокрема її пункту щодо продовольчої безпеки. Говорив для цього з президентом Сенегалу і головою Африканського Союзу про нашу ініціативу Grain from Ukraine – зерно з України. Ця ініціатива, яка реально повертає світу стабільність і передбачувальність, а також про те, як можемо залучити країни Африки до відновлення сили міжнародного права і гарантування всієї повноти глобальної безпеки. Ще одне. Сьогодні вдалося повернути додому з російського полону ще 50 українців, 4 офіцерів, 46 сержантів і рядових, армія, тероборона, нацгвардійці, ВМС та прикордонники. Я дякую всій нашій команді, яка працює для звільнення українців. Буданов, Єрмак, Усов, Малюк, Лубінець. Просто молодці. Дякую кожному і кожній, хто допомагає. Загалом від 24 лютого з російського полону вже повернули більше 1300 українців. Повернемо усіх інших. Вся Україна буде вільною. Всі українці будуть вдома. Слава усім, хто воює за нашу державу. Слава усім, хто працює для захисту України. Вічна пам'ять усім, хто віддав своє життя за незалежність. Слава Україні!
On that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 282 of the war in Ukraine, and that wraps up our news summary for today as well. If you enjoyed this news summary, and if you would like to see more of it, make sure to subscribe and also hit the like button. Hitting the like button helps us to continue on doing this and also spreading the word to the rest of the world, hopefully, if YouTube's still promoting us. And also, if you subscribe, it allows you to keep up to date with the news as well, which we run it every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays. And so, please make sure to do both of those things, and you'll help the Enforcer channel to keep on running, and the Leaf Spring Army to keep on growing. And so with that, it's now time for us to move into the polls and address the polls, and then the super chats, and then all of the live chats that we can as well. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so we have 3 polls to address, and the first one says, can you drive a manual car? And at the time I put that poll up, it was actually relevant, but now it's kind of out of context. But anyways, 74% said, yes, I am proficient. 12% said, yes, turns on Tokyo Drift music. And 14% said, no, I cannot drive manual. Now for me, I personally can't drive manual. I can ride a motorcycle, that's manual, but not a car manual. I really want to learn how to drive one. I've never had a manual car, but that's something I've always been interested in. But Enforcer, what say you?
I also do not know how to drive a manual car, but interesting fact, man, did you know that it's actually very odd in the United States for most cars to have automatic transmissions? Most cars around the world are still produced largely with manual transmissions.
Yes.
It's kind of weird when you think about it like that, because that's just a weird step up that the United States has in a very niche thing that really no one else in the world is into. Like, if you ask a British person, do you know how to drive manual? Yeah, my car's manual, you idiot. Or if an Australian, you know, they'd say the same thing. Everyone around the world drives manuals, but the US. It's just really weird like that. But because of that, I don't really know how to drive a manual. So with that, I hope that answers that fairly well. Also, Aaron Lowe said, I can't drive, period. And in some countries, you don't even have to drive, really. Like, if you live in any of the European countries, driving is just, it's pointless, really. I mean, unless you just want to, you can, but you can really get around in Europe just by mass transportation. It's actually nice, you know, and that's an important thing in the United States. If mass transportation did come around, it would have to be nice, because if you take Amtrak, sometimes it is kind of rough. You know, and I'm not trying to be rude about that, but that's the truth. You know, a homeless guy could, like, you know, like, kill you over a Coke or something, you know, like I've seen stuff like that happen, and worse, especially on New York City subways, which are almost like the definition of anarchy in a modern world, is the New York City subway system. And I hate that, because it's so neat, you know, and then tourists come over from around the world, and they're like, oh, let's ride the subway, and then they get down there, and some guy's trying to sell them a mixtape, and then another guy's like peeing in the end of the subway cab, and, you know, it's well, the subway coach, and it's just like, oh, come on, you know, I don't know why it's like that. Anyways, you know, a decent amount of people actually don't know how to drive a car worldwide when you think about it. But with that, we're on to the next one.
Right. And the next one said, do you think that casualty figures can be reliable? It looks like 66% said no, they are best estimates only. 24% said yes, but from Ukrainian sources only. 2% said yes, both Russia and Ukraine sources. And 8% said not sure. Now, for me, I'm definitely going to say they are nothing more than estimates. There's no way possible to get accurate numbers in the midst of a war. I know they said that they're supposedly counting the, you know, the dead, but I'm not really like putting a lot of stock in that on either side. But Enforcer, what say you?
Well, I'm actually pulling up some stuff to back that up. I would have to agree with the 66% of y'all that's nothing but estimates, because if you look right here, there's an exact number of killed for the Finns. And what's kind of interesting is that usually the victors of war always have exact casualties figures. And then the loser of a war never really gets exact casualty figures. You can see that here in the Winter War, an exact figure for the Finns. But so if we go down here, I'm looking at some of these pictures on Wikipedia, and he's like, oh crap. Trying to find the casualty reports. I saw them up there at the top, but they have a more detailed description on World War II. And wow, this has got to be one of the longest Wikipedia pages I have ever seen. So anyways, this right here is World War II deaths chart. It shows you all the deaths by country. And it shows you all the military and civilian deaths. Only problem is that no one really has an exact number as to what this really is. I mean, we don't even know if this is accurate, because the Soviet casualties is anywhere between 17 and 30 million in the Second World War. And then if we go to Vietnam, this is probably a pretty interesting one for a lot of people considering it's a recent war. We don't even know how many people the South Vietnamese lost. It's somewhere in between 195,000 and it can go all the way up to 430,000 dead. The United States, of course, has an exact figure. And even then, the United States, this is one thing I will give the United States credit for, and a lot of Western countries for, is that we really keep a very accurate account of all of our dead and wounded, because we have a very good, I guess you could say, support system in the background for the fighting units, and so we're able to catalog deaths and injuries a lot better than others would. And that also, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole right now, but look at the Vietnamese. For the Viet Cong, it's somewhere in between 30 to 182,000 civilians dead, and then it's somewhere military casualty estimates by the U.S. even are somewhere in between 666,000, round that up once, 667,000 and 950,765, which is a very approximate number, well, a very exact number to be an approximate, but you can see that casualty statistics are never accurate. They're only an attempt at trying to be accurate. There's really no way to know whether the casualty reports we're getting on Ukraine each day are perfectly accurate or not. Most of the time, they're probably not. They're probably a little high or they're probably a little low, and we never really will know. Another thing that may blow some people's minds and start to throw a lot of questions whether anything can be trusted is that we look at the population of the United States. It says that the population, as of right now, is 331.9 million people. What if I told you that this number is made out of thin air? We have really no idea if it's just 331.9 million people or more. We know that there's at least 331.9 million people here in the United States, but there could be millions more because we rely here in America on the census to account for the the population of citizens here, and it's not required to fill it out. So 331.9 million people filled out the census, so we know that there's at least that many people in the United States, but we don't know how many millions more there are that didn't fill out a census. And, that's why it's incredibly important, just in case if y'all didn't know why the census is taken, and, it's something they don't really care about. The census is incredibly important because it allows for the government, the federal government and state governments, to figure out who lives where and appropriate tax funds accordingly and make sure that it's spent in areas that have more people than they thought were there before or the last time the census was taken. And every country's like this. It's really weird because you look at Mexico and you can see that every year Mexico's growing at a steady rate, which is actually really interesting to see. But moving on from that, it's 130.3 million people. We really have no idea. And Russia's number is declining, which is true, but it may not be declining that slowly. It may be even greater. It may be less. All of these numbers are approximates. And it's really bizarre to think about that because really none of the population figures or deaths, I guess you could say statements, or even the global population is accurate. We have no idea. There's no way to account for everyone out there, so we're kind of guessworking with all these numbers. And that kind of makes it really weird, Matthew, to me. I don't know if it makes it to you, because it's like, how many people really are out there in America?
There's actually really 7 billion people all in the United States.
Yeah, because
that's a joke, by the way, in case somebody's gonna be like, what do you mean?
By the way, the UN said that the 8 billionth person was born, I believe, 3 weeks ago at this point, or a month ago, which is kind of interesting to think. And also, it throws in the question, is that really true? Did we really reach 8 billion then, or are we reaching 8 billion right now? Or did we reach 8 billion 3 months before that? Like, we don't really know. It's bizarre, like, people think that we have this whole thing figured out, like, with how everything works, but, like, let me put this into perspective. Let me show you all the USS Enterprise, which is a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier that was decommissioned a little while ago. Not the Starship, we're looking for the aircraft carrier. Here we go, the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the Enterprise. That one right there. There is not a single person alive that can explain to you how that whole ship works. Not a single person. The technology that makes up that aircraft carrier, which is so old now that it's been decommissioned because it's obsolete, no one really knows how it even worked. Even then, people would only know how certain systems work, like the nuclear engineers on board would know how the engine worked. The guy who did the water salination on board on ship, he would know how that works. But not a single person on that ship knew how everything worked exactly. And you think that, because mankind's able to produce these kinds of things, we would have the whole thing figured out from top to bottom, but people only know specific parts of the thing. It takes thousands of people with very specific jobs to do this kind of stuff, and without that, this ship would not be able to run, because there's one guy who doesn't hold all the knowledge just to this one thing. And so really, when you think about it, when you actually get down to it, the entire world we live in holds on by threads of very simple understandings of what's really going on around us, even the stuff we made with our own hands. And it's all just estimates and all kind of like put together with some tape, and we're hoping that the thing works. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next poll said Zelensky's aide claims that there are 13,000 Ukrainian military casualties, meaning fatalities. What are your thoughts? It looks like 48% said the number probably isn't accurate. 39% said it's okay, not as bad as Russian losses. 4% said that's a bad sign, not good for Ukraine. And 9% said I'm not sure. Now, on this one, I'm going to have to say that number cannot be accurate, in my opinion. If the Russian losses are approximately 90,000, according to their best estimates of what they've lost on the Russian side, to say there's only 13,000 Ukrainian casualties seems probably underreported if I had to take a guess. But, they have to keep up morale, and I'm assuming that they would want to underreport the number so it doesn't look worse than it is. But I would imagine they've had more losses, sadly. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would also have to agree they probably have more losses. I'm assuming it would probably be more in the range of 20 to 30,000, somewhere in there that they've taken. That's probably just killed. And, you know, Matthew put that in there. The casualties we're talking about is just fatalities only. It's probably close to 20 or 30,000, and total, they've probably taken around 90,000 casualties, including the wounded. The war has been going incredibly well for the Ukrainians, and they've inflicted a massive load of casualties on the Russians compared to their losses, but I still think it's not going to be that great. Because going off of that, that means that for every one Ukrainian soldier that's been killed, almost 8 Russian soldiers have been killed in their stay. And so it seemed like at the beginning of the war that seemed very plausible because the Russians were incredibly disoriented. They were literally driving through Ukrainian units that would then open fire on them and wipe them out. But this late in the war, and also seeing sometimes that, you know, and on video we don't show this a lot here, that sometimes the Ukrainians also got pretty bloody in some of these battles like Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, and also during the Battle of Mariupol, that it would be pretty hard at this point for the casualties not to be a little bit higher. But I'm not saying that they're on par with Russia's, like General Milley said, because that was just an idiotic statement with no support whatsoever that didn't even make any sense. But I am saying that they would be a little bit higher than that. But once again, the casualty reports aren't really ever going to be exact. It may be that number. It may even be lower than that. It may be way higher than that. There's really no way to know, but I do feel like it would be a little bit higher. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. It sounds like we're going through a little bit of lag, so can you hear me still?
I can.
All right, so it must have cleared up pretty quick. So that was our last poll. So now we are moving on to our Super Chat questions. And up first, we have a $50 donation, very generous, from Magic Sky Girl, the channel legend, who says, I got my super back. Excuse me.
I got my super back.
I'm over here like trying to hold in a cough. But anyways, Magic Sky Girl said, I got my... Excuse me. There we go. Maybe I can get through it this time. I got my super chat back, Enforcer, but I'm not going to make you do Mike Tyson. I have a real question. Will Ukraine hold Bakhmut, or will it become another Severodonetsk and Lysychansk? What say you, Enforcer?
I think they're going to hold it, me personally. And also, thank you so much once again, Magic Sky Girl, for helping this channel to keep alive. We rely literally entirely on viewer support, so I'm heavily appreciative for it. And to answer that question, I think it will not end up like Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. There is no river for the Ukrainians to get cut off on here. Bakhmut is equally divided by a river, and the Russians would have to cross it first, and that'll take some time, and I don't think they'll be able to do it. Also, the terrain is entirely different in this area. The Ukrainians would still control some dominating heights over the town, even if they lost it, and they would be able to fire down into it, inflict a decent amount of casualties, and probably push the Russians out. So I don't think it will end up like Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. I think they will win the battle, but just by the number of Russian forces that are here, it will be a pretty tough one to fight, and also due to the terrain, it adds an extra level of challenge that we haven't seen on any other battlefield so far. And so with that, I hope that answers that fairly well, and thank you so much once again for the support, Magic Sky Girl. You have been around forever in helping this channel to keep on running and helping it to have the ability for us to eat in the background, which I actually did during Zelensky's speech. I had Italian pinwheels from Publix, which are a delicacy in this house, and they're incredibly delicious. And I actually got to eat those thanks to y'all's support, which keeps me alive so I can keep doing this. And so thank you so much once again for helping us to keep alive, and thank you for being a Lee Spring Army legend. And I hope I was able to answer that question fairly well. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and next up, we have a $20 super chat from George, New York's premier contractor, who is, of course, a channel legend. George says, Lee Spring Army rocks. Hit the like button, and I think Donetsk City is next target, and this war will be over. Mark my word, big one is coming. By the way, Bakhmut may just be where Putler gets rid of Wagner for good many reasons.
And I thank you so much for the support, George's New York premier. Wait a minute, I am saying that right.
George, New York's premier contractor.
Yeah, George, New York's premier contractor. That's a tongue twister for me, but I thank you so much once again for the support. And I remember you were literally around since the very beginning, like day 4. So I've got to thank you so much for being around forever and also enjoying the Lee Spring Army. I hope if y'all do like the channel, make sure to subscribe. We are having a tough time because YouTube has shadow banned us. And so if you do subscribe, it helps us to overcome the shadow ban. It also helps y'all to keep apprised with the news. And if y'all hit the bell button, hopefully they'll let y'all know when these run. But anyways, I thank you so much once again for the support. And I think that Putin might want to get rid of the Wagner Group. It is a bit of a political entity in a way, but at the same time, I think that they he may not. It may be a bad look, but I don't know. That's kind of a tough one. It's, I mean, honestly, you can kind of view the Wagner group as the Russian equivalent of Blackwater, and we didn't really get rid of them entirely ever. They still exist under a different name. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, and an actual thought-provoking idea. I really can't give a clear answer or opinion on my end whether he would want it destroyed or not, but I do see a lot of reasons in which he would, mostly for it probably becoming a political entity or already being one in a way. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well, and thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep alive. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and up next, and also, by the way, I'm going to talk a little closer to my mic because I'm really like in a coughing fit over here right now, so maybe this will help. But anyways, yes. Up next, we have a $20 super chat from Santiago Flores, who says, "Good evening, Enforcer team. Did you hear about the Swedish official that I would be okay to sell the Saab JAS-39 Gripen to Ukraine, while many Ukrainian pilots have been trained on the F-16? Any thoughts?"
I think that the Saab 39 Gripen is an incredibly good aircraft, and we have looked at it on stream before, and we can look at it again. Gripen fighter. There we go. I spelled it with 2 P's. It was only 1. They actually have a nice website here where they sell them. Let me see if I can get on that website. The E series. Man, those things look cool. I really like Gripens. I think they're neat. I wonder if it has any ground support. Also, that's in Rio de Janeiro. I forgot the Brazilians had some of these things. You can see Christ the Redeemer up there on that hill. You know, like the Jesus that's, you know, T-posing on top of that hill.
Yes.
You know, for lack of a better explanation. But anyways, let's move on down and let's see what kind of armaments. Let's see here. Let's see here. Come on. Come on. Oh, man. Come on. Share with us the armaments. I know it was...
Wow, it has a full digital cockpit.
Oh, yeah, man. You know it. It's got to be modern. It's got to be nice. Honestly, that almost looks like a modern 737, like 900 or something like that with the whole glass cockpit. Like a private jet almost, really.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's even nicer than like an F-15. Well, at least an F-15C or something similar. Let's see here. Lethality. 10 hard points. Unrivaled ease. Conduct air-to-air. Air-to-surface. It can do air-to-surface. So that's what we're looking for. And I would say that the Gripen is a fairly good option. I would say it's up there with the F-16. Maybe even a little bit better, considering that the Swedes always produce a very high-quality aircraft. The Swedes have never been known to skimp on aircraft. They usually create incredibly good ones, especially for the time that they're made, and I'm sure that this is no exception. So with that in mind, I would say that the Gripen would be a good aircraft to send. I'm sure that there are some things on the F-16 that could be learned by a pilot fairly quickly who's also trying to get into the J-39, or vice versa, because they are all made to a similar standard. Sweden isn't a NATO country, at least not yet. It will be soon, but they do make them to where they could be sold to foreign clients, mostly NATO or Western aligned countries, and so I'm sure that there's a lot that is interchangeable in terms of knowledge in between the J-39 and a Western aircraft like an F-16, but I think it would be fine. I think it would take a little bit more training, but these are incredibly good aircraft, and I would say that it's a perfect replacement for the F-16 if for some reason Ukraine couldn't get those. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Santiago, and I hope that answers the question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next. Also, look at that. They actually have an outline of an F-16 right there talking about the avionics.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. Anyways, with that, thank you so much once again. I hope we addressed that comment fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from SuperBunker9000, who says, "Enforcer, you did good. Sam Elliott voiceover was great, and chat question, please. Slava Ukraine."
And thank you so much for the support. I'm glad that everyone enjoyed that Sam Elliott impression. It was a little bit nerve-wracking for me to put out that video today because I didn't know if it was going to be well-received or not. And let me go look at it real quick, and let me tell you all if it was well-received or not. So let's see. It has a like rate of 97.7%. It has been dropping a little bit throughout the day. It's gotten 36 dislikes, which is kind of sad. It got 220 comments, though, which is actually quite high for the amount of views it got. It got 8.2 thousand views. It's practically died already. I really hate that it died. Like, it didn't even get promoted hardly at all. Even to my own viewers, it didn't get promoted much, which is really sad. They didn't even give it any impressions at all, but it did fairly well, and it looks like all of the comments, which, what the hell? Let's read them off. Let's read them off. Let's have a little comment section. That's just great. Thank you, Roger. Love it. Please do more of them. Thank you so much, Nancy. Not a very good impersonation attempt. Nah. Awesome, just awesome. Thank you. Very entertaining. Thank you. Good job. Enjoyed the video. That is really good stuff. Very funny. Haha. Thank you so much, Marsic. I think you're here tonight on the live stream right now. Chopper73 nailed it. Thank you so much. Great video. Thank you. Oh my god. Are you kidding me? I love this Enforcer. And thank you so much, Magic Skygo. Also, we just addressed your super chat just a second ago. And thank you so much once again. I really liked making this video. And I think most of y'all have seen it, but in case if y'all haven't seen it, let me take this to a second screen again. And I'm going to pop it up and let y'all see. It's literally just a minute long. I thought it was incredibly fun to make, and it was also fairly decent. Also, by the way, we are running ads on this one. It's the only video that's run literally in a month that's had ads on it, so that's kind of fun.
Garlic, black pepper, and salt for the all-new breading-free blackened chicken sandwich. Do you copy?
We're running an ad in stream as well now, which kind of, you know, it's not ad-free. Anyways, we're going to mute it, because Popeyes is mid. So here we go. All right. So I'll let you all watch this. And let me know, if you haven't seen this yet, let me know what you think. And if you could, please hop over to this video on the channel after stream or during stream and watch it so that way you can get some views. Watch it all the way through and hit the like button because it helps it out a lot. So here's the video.
In the days of the Ukraine war, there's one kind of code that people live by. The Ukrainian code. Things like making sure not to sit in one spot for too long, also not to be in the way of enemy fire, are things that are pretty common to follow. Other things like having the best rocket system are also one of the coveted rules of the system. But there's one rule that nobody seems to really cover all too well. Never covet another man's missile launcher. Introducing the all-new Stugna anti-tank guided missile system, with a range so far that you can hit your X in another zip code, and you can also destroy tanks at 5 miles away. Guts, glory, Stugna.
Also, huge credit, by the way, to Nutters HD, who's on our Discord and also sent us this outro, because I had made sure to use it. He sends us 1 million of these things, and they're all really good, so I made sure to use this one at the end, just as a thanks to him for doing that constantly. But let me know if y'all liked it, because I thought it was fun to do. I thought it was kind of funny, but if it wasn't,
Enforcer, are you gonna tell them?
What?
That's actually me in the video.
You know what's funny about that, Matthew, is that so many people still mistake me for you. And like a lot of people down there were saying, "Oh my God, Enforcer Matt, I've always loved when you do that impersonation on stream. I'm glad you did it here." And it's like, but that's me. You know,
I think they actually thought it was me doing the imitation.
I don't know. Anyways, still, I hope y'all enjoyed it, though, because it was fun for me to make. We may make more of them, but they will be YouTube short format in the future instead of that, which was not. But I hope y'all liked it. Make sure to go over there and watch it. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. Real quick, can you actually go back and reread that one again? Make sure I covered it all.
You covered everything.
All right, so I covered everything. So with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that addressed the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right, and please bear with me, folks. I am really coughing badly. Hopefully this is not the dreaded virus, because this feels like a different cough than I usually have. But anyways, up next, I want to give a shout out to BC Skyman, who put in a $20 donation, as well as Rob, and also a $15 donation from Margaret Hemsley. And thank you very much to all three of you for that support, and they do not leave comments. But Enforcer, what say you?
Well, I thank you all so much once again for the support, because y'all didn't leave comments. Y'all know what I'm about to say. You didn't leave comments, but your support just a lot. And it does. It really does. I don't say that just to say it. It means a lot to us, because it helps us to keep this thing going. And so I got to thank y'all so much once again, all three of y'all, including channel legends in there, for helping us to keep this thing alive. And so thank you so much to all of y'all once again, because if it wasn't for y'all, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. And so with that, Thank you once again, and we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $12 super chat from Margaret Hemsley once again, who says, "You guys rock. I listened to your early streams, and I think you've gotten better and better. The interaction between the two enforcers makes it entertaining and informative, and keep it up."
And I thank you so much for the support. I'm glad that you say that, because one of the comments we get every once in a while is that the stream is dropping in quality, and I always thought that we were on the up and up for the most part in quality. I'm glad to hear that you think that, because I don't know, maybe it's been so long. It has been 282 days. Maybe a lot of people have got here or weren't here for the beginning and saw how far the channel has come in quality, but I thank you so much for enjoying what we do. It does mean a lot to me, and I put a lot of effort into trying to make sure that this is one of the best news channels out there on the war in Ukraine. And in case of y'all don't know what I'm doing tomorrow, we will be making a video on China tomorrow. It will be kind of like a rabbit hole in a way. I'll just be making a video of me probably popping around tabs on my computer and just talking about stuff, because those videos are fairly easy to make and don't require days worth of editing. But I think I'm probably going to be doing that tomorrow, and hopefully y'all enjoy that. If y'all do, let me know, and we may start expanding out into covering Chinese news and also Iranian news as well, considering that those things are going on pretty heavily. Hell, we might just extend into being a world news channel off of this stream. The stream will continue, but our videos will be every other bit of news around the world that's going on that ever pops up and is important, that has to deal with civil unrest, war, maybe even some economics. Although it's always hard to get down into economics because, you know, half of people think economics works one way, half think another, and then some people are in between, you know, like the 0.1%, and, you know, you'll piss off everyone else or whatever talking about economics, but we may get into that. Anyways, I thank you so much once again for the support and enjoying this and helping us to keep it running, because we rely on y'all's support a pretty good deal. In fact, we rely on y'all's support entirely. But thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Richard Kame Gibson. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Richard says, "Aloha from Waikiki again, and add this to the Coffee and Donuts Fund, and keep up the great work, and Slava Ukraine."
And thank you so much, Richard, for the support to the Coffee Fund, and also hello to Waikiki and at Wahi, or whatever he used to say. What did you say, Andy? It was a Wahoo or something?
Yeah, it was a different place,
Yeah.
though. Waikiki. I've always said that one correctly.
Yeah, but Waikiki is on Oahu Island. I think used to call it Oahu or something.
Yeah, something like that.
It was a funny gaffe. I liked it. But anyways, hello to Waikiki again, right here, on its own like little island with its own little canal. That canal is brown though. Like that looks like the Willy Wonka chocolate river right there. Goodness, I wonder why it's that brown. You know, I wonder if that's like a it can't be a sewage river, because that stuff filters right out onto the beach, and you know there would be a massive amount of EPA concerns of people swimming near something like that, especially at Fort DeRussie. You know, like that. I had to do it, but anyways, I thank you so much once again for the support. Can you reread the last part of that, man, to make sure I answered the question if there was one?
There was no question.
All right, but with that, I thank you so much once again. We will drop down in another road in Waikiki to take a look at it, the one near the Chocolate River. Everyone's like, it's sediment, and it probably it is, but you know, it's still fun to entertain if it's not sediment. And also, wow, it's actually really nice on the street. Kind of looks like California, honestly, right here. Interesting. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope we addressed that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep alive all the way from Waikiki Beach in Oahu, Hawaii.
All right. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Tracy Cagle, who says, "Does anyone know the reason for a major increase in fighter jet, F-18s, Warthog, and Apache training exercises lately here in the Sequoia Valley, Pikeville, Tennessee? It's been busy lately."
And I thank you so much for the support. I think I could try and give you a decent answer to that with some assumptions. But once again, remember, assumptions are just assumptions and don't really have any knowledge or information backing them up. They're just, I guess you could say, educated guesses at what that could be for. One, it could be the time of year that the war games are coming around. The United States often does war games where pilots get in a decent amount of flight hours and make sure that they can fly their aircraft under certain mission, I guess you could say, mission conditions and similar kinds of things, which could be the reason why it's incredibly busy. The other reason that it could be busy is that they are preparing those units to go overseas, and so they're getting them some flight hours, some flight time and training before they have to probably make the incredibly long flights over the Atlantic Ocean, which are incredibly grueling because, believe it or not, they actually fly those things over the Atlantic Ocean. It's a massive operation for the most part. They have to have a load of air tankers airborne over the North Atlantic to keep these aircraft flying all the way to Europe. And it's very strenuous on the pilots because being in such a small aircraft, not being able to stand up or move around for nearly 8 to 10 hours sometimes, because they do not fly supersonic, they fly subsonic because it conserves fuel. It's quite strenuous on pilots to do that. So that could be two reasons why. There's, of course, many other reasons that they could be doing that as well. But those would be my two best educated guesses as to why that's happening. We also have a lot of activity around here in the Birmingham area of our strato tankers, the KC-135s, I believe. Let me make sure I got that right. Again, KC-135. Hopefully that's... Yeah, that is the right one. That's not the KC-10. That's the 707-ish one. And once again, it's not a 707. It's based off of the prototype for the 707. But with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. We've also noticed that as well, and it may just be that time of year because it kind of comes around in the cycle in a way. And so with that, I hope I answered that question fairly well, and thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope we were able to help with some educated ideas as to why that may be happening, but we don't have a clear answer either. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Chris Lunday, who says, William Spaniel released a video today summarizing Crimean history and importance to Russia and may help explain your opinion on the reality of Crimea remaining in Russian hands at the end of the war.
And thank you so much for the support, and I will try and look into that video after stream, but one thing I have to say, and this is something of a disconnect in between governments on an administrative level, like the Russians, and what we look at down here. Culture and history matters nothing to governments and economic institutions. Rather than keeping the populace in line, it's not really a big deal. The Russians aren't really looking at Crimea for its historical significance to Russia or the Russian Empire or the Soviet Union. It's looking at it as a strategic interest. They could really get, like, for example, they gave up Crimea a long time ago. Crimea... In the modern world, it was a part of Ukraine for a decently long time until the Russian Empire came in and took over the entire thing. And at that point, Crimea was a couple of different Cossack states. But anyways, moving on from that, because that becomes a very, very deep rabbit hole right there. Getting into the modern world, Lenin carved up Crimea as a part of Ukraine when he made the Ukrainian Soviet Republic, or the Socialist Republic. And so that was... kind of on Lenin's end, that was appeasing the Ukrainians because it was historically Ukrainian, and so they were doing that to try and, I guess you could say, also I will try and speed up, but they were trying to do that to appease them culturally, and then Stalin came in and treated them poorly. Anyways, the significance of Crimea was Sevastopol. That port is incredibly important. You would see that port was so important that the French and the British would attempt to take it during the Crimean War, which is literally named after the peninsula, because that's where British and French forces landed, and they immediately went for Sevastopol and took the port. So in that regard, it's not really a cultural thing. It's not really a historical thing of like legacy or heritage or anything similar, because economic institutions and governments don't really work off of that much. They just work off of what is strategically viable for the government or what is economically viable for their economy. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, but I will make sure to look into that video because I'm heavily understating what culture plays into these decisions sometimes, and it does play some part, but I would say it plays more of a backstage part to the strategic and economic concerns. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Michael Cabrera, who says, Enforcer, have you seen the quality of movie stars that Russian and have shown? Sean Penn has visited Ukraine and left his Oscar with the president until Ukraine's victory. Russia has Steven Seagal.
And I thank you for the support. Who cares about Steven Seagal, though? That guy is just a turd. The Sean Penn, don't really know a lot about Sean Penn because I don't know a lot about modern pop culture or anything.
I think he's a documentary filmmaker.
Oh, yeah, you know, who would care about that guy, too? Those are only two guys. Steven Seagal has been off his rocker ever since he was born, so I don't really care about them all that much. Anyway, Steven Seagal lives in Russia, and he's all into that stupid crap, man. So with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, but I wouldn't put too much into it. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope we addressed that comment fairly well, and don't let that get to you. Because those two, well, Steven Seagal is a psycho. The other guy is probably a psycho if I knew anything about him. So that we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Oats Air, who says, final/OT, Kraken 3, Capitals 2. Take a question from the chat, Slava LSA and Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much once again for the support. I do not know anything about sports, but it is good to hear that whoever won. Sports are always fun to win. And we will make sure to take a question from the live chat as well. And thank you so much once again, Oats Air. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
You're right. And the question goes to Beef Taco, who says, are we seeing a Russian entrenchment that mirrors the Berlin Wall days?
And not quite. I would say this resembles a lot more of the Siegfried Line, the Maginot Line, or the Hindenburg Line from the First World War. The Berlin Wall would be actually lightly defended compared to what we're seeing right here. The Berlin Wall was primarily made to stop civilians. The Hindenburg Line, the Siegfried Line, and the Maginot Line were to stop entire armies. So this one would be more so on that level. And so with that, I thank you so much once again. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Joseph M. Sika, who says, I don't have much money, so can't tip too much, but I love you guys. And I love talking to you guys last night, too. And thank you guys for being so honest and putting a smile on people's faces. Take a question in the live chat.
And thank you so much once again for the support, Joseph. It helps us out a whole load with your support, and it's totally fine that you don't have much to give. I'm perfectly fine with you just being here and watching. I say that a whole load, and I really do mean it. If y'all just want to watch, that's totally fine. But if y'all help us out, y'all get to determine how much y'all help us out, and we're incredibly thankful because without y'all, we wouldn't be able to eat. So, I gotta say, I enjoyed talking to you last night as well. That was a really fun talk about the quarry in Boston, and the overlook that it has on the city and everything. It was neat. I liked it. And also, thank you so much for enjoying how we keep high spirits on this channel, because some people want us to have low spirits and treat this whole entire thing like a funeral. And while it is a war, I'm not into funerals. And so, with that, thank you so much once again. And we will take a question from the live chat. And so, with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and the question goes to Arnold DeGans, who says, how effective are trenches these days with all the drones being able to drop bombs onto them?
They are still quite effective. They're not as effective as they would be in, I guess you could say, the First World War. They were a whole other level of effective then. But now they're still somewhat effective. They do protect you from the large amount, the greater amount of artillery barrages, but they cannot really protect you from drones, although the artillery protection still makes them worthwhile to make. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. And thank you so much once again, Joseph, for the support and allowing us to get to a live chat. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, big shout out to M. Adams for putting in a $5 donation. And thank you very much for that. And they did not leave a comment, but once more, we do appreciate the support. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Quiet Karma, who says, depending on how close they are to the explosion, they will die from conclusive forces rather than shrapnel.
And thank you so much for the support. Also, everyone, it appears that I got something wrong. Apparently, they meant Sean Penn gave his Oscar to President Zelensky, not Putin. And I took that as, and I think Matthew may have taken it as that as well, that he gave it to Putin. So sorry about that.
No, I definitely knew he gave it to Zelensky. He put it on loan to him, I think.
Oh, the way that super chat was read, I thought it had been given to Putin. So I didn't mean to say anything about that about him. I said I don't really know a lot about him, but he must be psycho if he gave it to Putin. But anyways, apparently it was given to Zelensky. So those comments were just completely far off left field because they didn't even have any backing. That was given to Putin. Anyways, also, nice evil bashing Sean Penn. Don't bash him. He actually supports Ukraine, which is pretty fair. But anyways, getting back to this one, could you reread that one?
Let's see. Depending on how close they are to explosion, they will die from conclusive forces. I think they meant to say concussive. rather than shrapnel.
And I thank you so much for the support. And that is true. Concussive forces can actually screw you over. And sometimes tank crew members don't die from being hit by the shell. They get killed from overpressure in the cab. So that is actually quite true. It's very scary when you think about it. They can pretty much be killed from the inside out with your organs imploding from overpressure. But that is the reality, and it's pretty gruesome, to be honest. Honestly, I'd rather die from being directly hit than being killed from overpressure or anything similar, or concussive force. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope we addressed the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Secular Sakai, who says, America should build one of those power ships. It could be worthwhile to loan to other nations under the right conditions or for emergency response.
Let's see. Also, I just saw something in live chat. We'll check that out, but who really cares? I don't mean that in a disparaging way to you, but who really cares? Anyways, to get to that one, I think it would be a good idea to build an electrical generating ship like that. We may have one that we don't know about, but I think that it would be nice to have. We could help out countries around the world and make sure that we have some kind of soft power on them because of the support we give with that electric generating ship. I think that's pretty cool. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. I think it would be a neat idea. If we don't have those already, we should have a couple. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
All right. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Try and Take Alaska, who says death total. UC says EST to be confirmed. Ukraine collects all Russian bodies or bones or parts and bag and put on body train to be returned families. That's interesting.
Did he say the Ukrainians were doing that?
I'm not really sure. Let me look through it real quick. Apparently, Ukraine is doing that.
Interesting. And that is true. They have been doing that for a little bit, but they're not doing that often anymore. That is a little bit dated news in a way, believe it or not. They stopped doing that because the Russian bodies started piling up so bad, and this refrigerated train requires so much fuel to keep alive that it's really useless for them. They would rather let the bodies rot and use that fuel to continue the war and help them to fight and win than to just keep some bodies in somewhat preserved state. So that is true. That is true in a way, and they do still have a couple of them in the refrigerator train, but by and large, they either just bury them in pits now, or they pick them up and they try and send them to Russia as soon as possible after they scrape them off the ground. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, folks, I do apologize for how I'm sounding. I have gone downhill very quickly in like the past 10 minutes. I feel like I'm totally out of energy all of a sudden. And also my throat is feeling really strange right now too. So sorry about that. But anyways, up next, we have a $50 super chat from Walter A. Lakota Jr., who says, Aloha, Enforcer Matt, and LSA from OG Ellison Bosun. It seems that Bakhmut is a feint for a major move this winter. What say you, Enforcer Matt?
And I thank you so much for the support, Walter. And I would have to actually say, with the amount of forces that we know are dedicated to this area, it's something like 12 to 15 of them, we're assuming, that it couldn't be a feint just because of the amount of soldiers they have. Also, Matthew, if you want to pass me the iPad, in case you're
There's only a few more left.
Oh, okay. But just in case you get too bad off, just tell me you're going to bring the iPad over here, and I'll just make sure to go through them on my own, so that way you can hop on off. But let's see, Bakhmut is a feint. I don't think it is a feint, because the amount of forces that are being dedicated to this area and committed to the front lines right now, probably with a load of BTGs in reserve that we don't even know about, it seems like this is the major offensive that the Russians are trying to pull off, and it seems to be the logical one. It is the end of the T-1302 highway from Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, which is incredibly important, and it could serve as a rail hub for further operations moving towards Slovyansk and Kramatorsk. And so on those means, it is an important town, and I think that they are probably actually trying to fight for it. But I think that there won't be any larger and major offensives. We know that it's very hard for the Russians to even support this one. It was very hard for them to support the first Battle of Bakhmut, probably much more the second one. And we can already see that they built defensive positions for a couple of miles behind their current front lines in preparation of losing. So I think that what we'll probably be seeing is that they will fail at this current, I guess you could say, battle, and then they'll fall back to the defensive positions that look like the Hindenburg line at this point. But once again, I could be wrong. It could go the other way. We will have to wait and see, because some other areas of the front line, like the Northeast, have been incredibly quiet, and also the South, and you would think that the Russians would try a little, considering that they're suicidal, although they probably wouldn't be able to support any of the offensives at all. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Walter. I hope we addressed that comment fairly well. And it's always good to hear from the princely Lord of the North Pacific, King of the Snow, well, Prince of the Snow Crabs. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right. And up next, real quick, Walter A. Lakota said, I meant UKA.
Oh, he meant Ukraine. As far as Ukraine and Bakhmut, it's not necessarily faint, considering that they are in a defensive against Russia. I think it is. I think the Ukrainians are more so stopping any planned defensives they have to wait for the Russian units here to get whittled down and weakened, so that way if they attack in other areas of the front lines, the exhausted forces here cannot be moved elsewhere to reinforce those areas. So in that way, I guess you could say, Walter, that it would be a feint on their end, and they're just kind of waiting for the Russians to grind themselves down on their own and then come through and do whatever they would in the future, and the Russians would really be left without any recourse but to sit by and let it happen. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well, and thank you so much once again, Walter. I'm sorry I misunderstood that the first time.
All right. And with that being said, we are moving on to our next one, which is from Tunes Nod, who puts in a $5 donation and says, please briefly explain Article 4 and 5 of NATO.
So Article 4 lays down the premise of what would be done if NATO was attacked, and it talks about convening the Security Council to talk about the attack and what they would do. And Article 4 is really just a lead up to Article 5. It's getting everyone in a meeting so that way they can discuss if Article 5 was breached. Article 5 lays out that if any aircraft or weapons systems or any military personnel or civilians in NATO territory were killed by a foreign country, that the NATO alliance has to decide whether that attack was upon them, and if it was, they all have to act in kind. I don't know how the voting works on that, whether it's just simple majority or whether it has to be unanimous, but it is pretty, those two really just work in unison. Article 4 invokes Article 5, and then you have to decide whether Article 5 was seriously was seriously breached or if it wasn't. And so with that, I hope that explains in a very short nutshell what Article 4 and Article 5 are. And thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope we cleared that up, just in case if you were wondering about that, or if you were asking for others. Maybe that cleared it up for many people, hopefully. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
All right, and next up, we have a $5 super chat once again from Joseph M. Sika, who says, I want to say one more thing. I'm trying to think of something smart to say. Hang on, I got nothing. Except everyone in here rocks, and I heart you all.
And thank you so much for the support and the kind words. I think you rock. I think everyone in the Lee Spring Army rocks, and I heart you all too, because, and that sounded really cheesy, didn't it, Matthew? That sounded just absolutely cringe. I heart you all. That on my end, that sounded bad. But anyways, I enjoy all of y'all, and I think y'all are great. I love coming in here and reporting the news for y'all. I love that sometimes y'all throw in incredibly interesting stuff that we didn't know and clarify some things for us, which is really good and really fun as well. And I just enjoy all of y'all, and so I got to thank you so much once again for the support, so that way we can keep on coming in here and we can all enjoy being in this live stream together. Thank you so much once again for the support. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
All right, and up next we have a $5 super chat from Rad Doctor, who says, hello from Pittsburgh, check out my town. Go Steelers, and please take a question from the live chat.
And thank you so much for the support, and we will go check out Pittsburgh. So here's Pittsburgh. It's a very interesting town because it actually has this fork where the Ohio River it pretty much dissects itself into the I don't even know how to pronounce the name of this river. I've heard of it before. I watched Aerial America on this town, and they said it. I can't, though. I'm sorry. But it also turns into the Allegheny River, which there's a locomotive named after the Allegheny. Anyways, let's take a look at this town. Also, the Kerry Blast Furnace. That's kind of like our Sloss Furnace, Matthew, but on a smaller scale.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Matthew's probably over there with, like, stuff, like, paper stuffed in his nose and stuff with snot, like, flooding out of it. Yeah, it looks like he's dying over there. Let's take a look at downtown Pittsburgh, though. Let's see here. Market Square. I want to live in Market Square. Oh, pretty nice, actually. I like They even got 5th Avenue Place. Neat. I like this place. This is clean. But I have heard things about Pittsburgh that it's gone downhill, but you wouldn't know it from Google Street View. It looks just fine. I like it. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support and allowing us to take a look at your hometown of Pittsburgh, which does look quite nice. And also, did he have a question, Matthew?
Let's see here. Which super chat was that again? That's right, Rad Doctor. He said, Pittsburgh, check out my town, and question from the live chat.
And let's get to that question from the live chat.
And the question goes to Fethdar, who says, any comments on the death of the ISIS leader the other day?
He's gone and forgotten, and he won't be missed. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. Not really a lot to add there. ISIS leaders are leaders of a terrorist organization. If they're killed, good on whoever got them. And so with that, we are on to the next one. I hope that answered that fairly well.
Right. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Walter A. Lakota Jr. He says, it's me again. And the enforcer do a General Order 13 roll call.
And I thank you so much for the support, Walter. And I think you're asking for a roll call, which is pretty interesting. So we're going to activate General Order 13. So if we ever do 13 general orders in a fundraiser, we're going to have past 13 and go straight to 14. But we're going to pull out General Order number 13. If you are a Lee Spring Army member and you are in this live chat right now, tell us that you're here, because I would like to know if y'all are here, and also if you want to put down where y'all are from, like not the specific street, but like the town or the state or the region of a country that you're in, put it down, because I would be interested in seeing that as well. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Walter, and I hope you enjoy seeing the roll call results for General Order number 13. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Right. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Michael Cabrera, who says, sorry for starting up some confusion about Sean Penn. He is a good actor and a hell of a guy. Like me, he's made mistakes, but who hasn't?
And thank you so much once again for the support, Michael. And I think that was a misunderstanding on my end. I actually didn't... I don't really know a lot about Sean Penn. I don't really know a lot about modern actors at all. And I think due to my ignorance on his backstory, I didn't know that he gave that to Zelensky. I thought he had given it to Putin. But that's totally fine. I mean, like, hell, I mean, everyone screws up whatever they're saying a lot. I do that a lot on stream, and I have to clarify many things. It's totally fine. I wouldn't worry about it. But with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and real quick, big shout out to Secular Sakai and also Timmy for each putting in a $2 donation, but without a comment. And thank you very much to both of you for that support, and thank you for helping us to keep those lights on. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Joseph M. Siga, once again, who says, pick a question from the live chat that you wouldn't normally answer. I'd love to hear anyone's opinions and questions.
All right, and so thank you so much once again, and let's get it.
All right, so let me pick a strange one if I can find it. Let's see here. Let's see. One we typically wouldn't answer. If they're in a spreadsheet, we would definitely want to answer them. So it's kind of hard to find one, but let's see here. Let's see. WNNR 1957 says, is Russia supplying their military a ration of alcohol, or are the soldiers stealing all the alcohol, vodka, etc. from Ukrainians?
I believe they give rations of alcohol in some places, and then they buy it in others. It really just depends on where they are and what kind of unit they're in, because the units vary greatly due to the levels of corruption and where they're based in Russia. But for the most part, based off of Soviet history and early Russian Federation history, we can assume that there is booze flowing somewhere that they're probably supplying. And so with that, I thank you so much for a really interesting question. Also, I thank you so much, Joseph Sika, for the support and also letting us get to it. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and I hope we answered that question fairly well based off of our knowledge, but take that with a grain of salt because we're not really sure if it's accurate for the whole of the Russian army or not. And with that, we are on to the next one.
You're right. And with that being said, that is our last super chat for now. So we're going to move into our live chat questions. And up first, we have our Morse code decoders of the stream, Mark Hodges, CFA, WF2U, and also a BME, who said, the Morse message today reads, did you watch the Sam Elliott video today in Slava, Ukraine?
Oh, got it correct. And did you watch that video? Did you like it? Let me know. I would love to know if y'all enjoyed it and if y'all would like to watch it, and watch it twice and watch it 3 times, because that helps. that helps the video to explode. And that helps, hopefully, for people to enjoy that kind of stuff. And maybe people will start enjoying the little comedy videos that I'll be doing with voice impressions. But with that, I thank you so much once again for a pretty interesting little Morse code decoding right there. And I thank you so much for keeping that up for 282 days of war. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have another $10 super chat from Michael Cabrera, who says, thanks for being humble and human. Your rock and also Sam Elliott video was great.
And I thank you so much for the support, Michael Cabrera. And I thank you so much for enjoying the Sam Elliott video. I don't like to say I'm humble or not, because, you know, I just leave that up to public judgment, because it kind of seems unhumble to say I am humble, you know. That's like being, man, I am so modest, you know. Like, that's like a rich person saying, I'm so modest about my wealth, and then they sit there and talk about, oh, I could buy that car and I could buy that one, and they're talking about Rolls Royces and stuff. It's like, it's the opposite, you know. So I don't want to say I'm humble. That's really up to y'all if I am or not. But I thank you so much for the kind word and the compliment. It means a lot to me, and I'm highly honored that you think I'm humble. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and you rock again, Michael. And once again, I want you to let you know, no problem at all. It was just a little mix-up, and we got it clarified. So as long as it's clarified, it's no big deal. It's not like there's going to be people on the internet who remember that forever and ever and hate me and harass me for the rest of my life because of it. That's just insane. I'm just kidding. Anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and we have another super chat from Joseph M. Sika, who puts in a $5 donation and says, are there some questions that you do not just want to read? It's understandable. Will you still read it?
Let's see. And there's some that you do not just want to read. It's understandable. Will you still read it? We could. And so with that, do you have any curveballs, Matthew? Any tough ones?
So I'm not seeing any curveballs. I see something. We don't want to start any channel beef or anything like that. So I don't know if you want to address that one, Enforcer. That's one we typically wouldn't answer to be literal.
He's asking us to address a curveball though. So I don't know. I mean, like, if you want to read it off, you can read it off. We'll see if we want to address it.
So I'm going to refrain from saying the name of the channel, but I think y'all all know who this is talking about. Jerry S. said, Enforcer, I just checked out this other channel thing. Cinema Tissue. Wow. He's pissed that LSA members go to his site, and he says spams his site. It's pretty funny.
Huh. Well, that's pretty interesting to hear. I believe that channel we have actually mistakenly had beef for. We were addressing another channel, and they thought that we were addressing them, because I actually read that one earlier in the live chat. Matthew actually picked it out, so I saw the name of the channel. We actually had a beef with them. We weren't even addressing them. And then they took it as us addressing them, which honestly, in a way, was kind of weird to me, because considering that that wasn't even directed to them and they took it that way, you know, it's like, you know, like at that point, it's like throwing a stone into a pack of dogs, and the one that yelps is the one that got hit. That was kind of weird to me. But anyways,
it's just, I'm convinced at this point, like, I can understand if the first one was an honest misunderstanding, but he's trying to just get attention at this point. That's really, really pitiful.
But I'm not here to talk about that. We've sent good wishes his way before on his channel. We've been over there. He's been on ours. I don't know why he's complaining about that, because we have some of his people that watch our show a little bit, and we never complain about them being here. You know, I mean, it's the Ukraine war. I'm here to cover a war. You know, and
yeah, let's put all that junk aside, like all this stuff that he's talking about, and let's simply just raise money to help save people's lives, and like, put all that other crap aside.
You know, like the LSA is like a beacon. It's like a lighthouse out there. If you're a channel out there, anywhere out there, even if you're not mine, and someone comes around and is like, LSA, you know that they are united in the cause to support Ukraine, because the LSA is pro-Ukrainian as a unit. So I don't even know why they would be complaining about that. That's like someone coming in and saying, hey, I'm pro-Ukraine, and you know, you get like 100 comments like that. You're like, oh my god, I'm not stopping getting pro-Ukrainian comments, and you're a pro-Ukraine channel. Like, that doesn't make much sense to me. But anyways, that's just odd. You know, I don't really get it, because we actually clarified that we weren't intending that message for him, and it sounds like he's still got a little bit of a beef. So with that, I guess that is what it is. But I thank you so much once again for the support, Joseph. I hope we address that fairly well. Or Mr. Sika. I like Mr. Sika. Sicko or Sika. That still sounds really cool. I hope we addressed that fairly well, and I hope we addressed a curveball. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Heather in New Hampshire, who says the Sam Elliott video was awesome and great job. Matt, get lots of rest and feel better soon. Can we get some LSAs in the chat and answer a live chat, please? And Heather, thank you very much for the kind words. And I have no idea what has hit me so quickly, but I have been zapped, and I do not feel very good right now. So, but thank you so much for the support, though.
He's been inflicted with the plague. So we'll be looking into that a little bit after stream. If anyone knows any treatments, let us know. I think one of the treatments of the plague, Matthew, in the Middle Ages was to get feces and rub it on the lesions on your skin.
That's nice.
We'll try that after stream. I'm just kidding. Anyways, with that, thank you so much once again for wishing Matthew well. Hopefully he gets over this. Hopefully it's just something like one of those night-long fevers, like your midday fevers. I get those every once in a while. Like where you just wake up and you feel like you're sick, but you don't have a fever, and you go through the whole day feeling like that. You go to sleep and wake up the next day, you're fine. But anyways, with that, thank you so much once again for wishing Matthew well, and we are on to the next one.
All right. So did she ask for a live chat?
I don't know. You have the.
But anyways, we're going on to one anyway. So I guess that was a silly question on my part. But anyways, up next from the live chat, we have a question from Mad Machine, who says, "Do you think if Ukraine can get Russian soldiers to surrender if you give them free vodka?" And absolutely yes.
Oh yeah, you could. These people are alcoholics. It's like providing a druggie drugs. They'll do whatever to get that. So I would say yes. I mean, even if it's a joke, I mean, it is a funny one, but I think there's a little hint of truth to it too. So with that, I hope that answers the question, and we are on to the next one.
Right, and up next we have a question from Salazar, who says, "Question for Enforcer: The West has committed to training tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers in the next few months. Can this make up for the amount of cannon fodder that Russia using?"
Reread that one again for me real quick.
The West has committed to training tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers in the next few months. Can this make up for amount of cannon fodder that Russia is using?
Yes, it can. They've already trained a whole load of Ukrainian soldiers with Western doctrine, and that's helped out a lot. And the continued pumping of Ukrainian soldiers trained to the Western doctrine back into Ukraine will help to counter the sheer numbers that the Russians can levy in small areas like Bakhmut. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. And thank you so much once again for a really good question, actually. It took me a second to understand it, but it was a pretty good one. Also, I see some people in the live chat trying to call out the other channel. Listen, one thing I would like to say is that while I did beef with one small channel before, which is not the one that's being talked about, I would like to ask if y'all didn't list out the other channel and bring up what they said, because maybe, I don't know, maybe they're having a bad day or something over there, and they just, are angry about something, and so they say something rash. I don't know. But let's try and keep it civil. The LSA is all about supporting Ukraine, and I don't want anyone to go around trying to beef with others. This channel never started for beef. Beef is something I'm not really into much. So I would just ask that, y'all just let it slide. Don't try and go on any inquisitions or anything like that. We're just gonna leave it alone, because we've gone over there, we've supported the guy before. We've even been in there. We've told people, hey, great channel. He's been over here. I don't know what his thing is. He actually
neither. It kind of pissed me off a little bit because I was over there supporting the guy, but people are a little strange.
He came over here, and I remember he sent in a super chat, and we answered it, and we even talked about his channel a little bit. That's just weird. I don't know what's up with him. I mean, maybe he's having a bad time. I don't know, but. We've never wished the guy bad, and I don't know why he's saying things about the Lee Spring Army, but don't worry, because no matter what anyone says about the Lee Spring Army is still the Lee Spring Army. At the end of the day, the enforcer's at the helm, the enforcer protects. I mean, it is what it is. So with that, we are on to the next one.
Right. And up next, I think this might be the last one of the night, unless you want me to deliver the iPad over there. Joseph M. Sika puts a $10 donation in once more and says, "Don't want you guys to go. Key. Let's get serious. Honestly, think soon that Putin will be overthrown or eliminated. Think everyone has their limit, and Russian people are pretty much to their breaking point."
Russian people are to their breaking point, but one thing I will say, Joseph, and I think that you can agree with this, is that sometimes pushing people to their breaking point unifies them a little bit further. For example, on 9/11 here in the United States, you would think that would have really started to make the United States a little bit chaotic. Instead, it solidified the country. And not to say that, you know, this war is helping to strengthen Russia, but Radio Free Europe did do a non-biased third-party survey in Russia of the Russian public the best they could, and it seemed that war support had increased by 5% across all age groups. So it may be that war support is increasing for now, but you got to remember, I think this is really going to end up imploding on itself, because while the war support is actually, oddly enough, increasing as the war goes on, once it's lost, because we do know that it will inevitably be lost, that is going to implode. It's going to explode in on itself, because these people may be getting lied to so badly that their support for the war continues to increase, and once the house of cards comes crumbling down, they're going to freak out and go into, like, straight up riot mode like the people in China are right now and the people in Iran. And it might be so bad that the Russian government can't really put it down and can't survive it, because the military might even be on their side at that point. But that is a pretty good point, and we may see that Putin gets overthrown right at the end of this war, or right after the end of the war. I think that will most likely be the time frame that we would see Putin getting overthrown in a coup. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Joseph. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. But you do have a good point, and we may actually see that the war, that poll done by Radio Free Europe may have been done a little bit in secret, so it was really hard to get answers, and people in the public may not be, you know, feeling to say freely that they don't support Russia, and the war support may actually be dropping. It's just that people don't want to say that in public because they're scared of having the Russian government come for them. But with that, I thank you so much once again for support. It's a good point, and we may see that he gets overthrown. And so with that, we are on to the next one. Also, Matthew, knowing that you're sick, we're going to answer 2 more questions, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream. So with that, on to the second to last one of the night.
All right, and this one goes to Sitting and Thinking, who says, any updates on the Kinburn Spit?
We have not gotten any updates on the Kinburn Spit. We do know that the Ukrainian Special Forces raided the peninsula a couple of times, and apparently the Russians have evacuated civilians out of the area, but it's such a slow simmering thing, a development going on down there, that there's not really a lot to talk about, and it seems that the Russians still hold the Kinburn Spit. So, unfortunately, not really. So I hope we answered that question fairly well, and it's time for us to get on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
Right, and that viewer is David Erickson, who says, what next weapons platforms do you think the USA will give to Ukraine next? Any talk about it? And thank you.
I believe that the U.S. is going to be giving, of course, the NASAMS next. I think they may be giving the Patriots as well, but we can largely assume that the next things will be missile-based. It's either going to be air defense, well, it's all going to be air defense missile-based. It's either a NASAMS or more NASAMS or just Patriots at all. So it will be surface-to-air missile-based. Beyond that, everything else would be next. So there's not really a lot to add on to it. But if I had to take a shot at a close runner-up, I think that right now it seems that aircraft would be the closest to being sent over there, but those are really far away from even being a close second, because it seems like we're always reluctant to send them. But we never hear talks about tanks, so we know that those are even further down on the list, at least from the United States. And so with that, I hope that addresses the question fairly well. I think that NASAMS or Patriots will be the next things to be sent into Ukraine that are important and incredibly expensive. And so with that, it is time to end tonight's stream. I thank you all so much once again for the support. I hope you all have enjoyed tonight's stream. I've enjoyed it a whole load. I love that all of y'all have come here to watch the news tonight from our channel. It's always a high honor to me. Y'all don't know how much of an honor it is for me to be able to talk to y'all about the war, and that y'all appreciate my news. Because y'all could go to any other channel out there and watch their news and never watch mine. And y'all have chosen to watch my news. And I'm highly honored that y'all are here tonight. And most of y'all are here every night watching this news. And so with that, I will see y'all all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time on another day of war in Ukraine, and hopefully we'll have some incredibly good news to cover then. With that, I thank you all so much once again. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see y'all then. Good night, take care, and good luck.
Yes. The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Слава, ні воля.
ця доля. Згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці. Запануєм і ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького